The Iron Throne of Ice and Fire. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 276 The Three Children of the True Dragon. Barona opened the wooden box brought by Sir Barristan. Daenerys looked at the head in sight and said, "Is this John Connington?" Hearing this, Sir Barristan, who was kneeling on one knee, raised his head and replied, "Absolutely true, Your Highness." Daenerys nodded slightly. She raised her hand to signal, and Barona called the waiter to move the wooden box away. After a moment of silence, Daenerys moved her feet and came to Sir Barristan. She raised her chin slightly and said, "Sir, thank you for your contribution." Barristan lowered his head respectfully, and his tone was very sincere. "Your Highness, my road to atonement has just begun." He looked up at Daenerys. "I ask that I can serve you for the rest of my life." After a pause, Daenerys called, "Barona." Hearing this, Barona turned and left. Not long after, her figure reappeared in the small hall, with a longsword in her hand. Taking the longsword, Daenerys lowered her eyes and looked at the sword with a cold glow, and said, "Sir Barristan, it's back." Sir Barristan took the sword with both hands with a solemn expression. When he saw the longsword, he was moved and said, "It." A gentle smile appeared on Daenerys' beautiful little face, and she said, "Yes, it's back. You once threw it at the feet of the usurper." Chapter 168. When you left the Red Castle, Lord Green left it behind. After a pause, she continued, "I hope you will pick up the sacred sword of oath again and reforge the glory that belongs to you." Sir Barristan's eyes were filled with tears. The old knight needs no glory, and he will be on the road of atonement for the rest of his life. "Get up, sir. I appoint you as my Iron Guard. I swear to the gods, I will loyally protect you until the end of my life." Daenerys nodded slightly and repeated, "Get up, my Iron Guard." Sir Barristan then slowly stood up. His brows that had been furrowed for months finally relaxed. His eyes brightened, as if he had suddenly become several years younger. Unconsciously, Daenerys also felt a sense of relief. "Sir Barristan, for safety, you and I need to conceal our identities in front of outsiders. My external identity is Princess Rhaella of the Summer Isle." Chapter 212. Sir Barristan nodded and said, "Your Highness, your decision is wise. I will continue to use the name I used in Essos, Arstan the Whitebird." After a pause, he added, "I will also prepare a visor." Daenerys smiled. She nodded slightly, and invited, "Sir, walk with me. I want to hear your story in Essos." The back garden of the government hall in Mermaid Harbor. After listening to the experiences of Sir Barristan and others in the Golden Company, Daenerys praised, "Sir, Knight Fearless, you are a great warrior." After a while, she paused and said suddenly, "Tomorrow, we will leave here by ship, and our destination is the Eyrie. I've heard about the war in the Vale." Sir Barristan hesitated and asked, "Is Lord Green the new master of the Vale?" After a pause, he added, "I want to know if he is legal." After a pause, Sir Barristan bowed slightly and said, "Please forgive the old knight's stupidity. You are the heir to the Targaryen family. As long as you allow, everything Lord Green does in the Seven Kingdoms is legal." Daenerys smiled and moved her gaze to the blooming flowers. She said, "This place is different from the Seven Kingdoms that Viserys talked about. He told me, when he led his troops to the land of Westerland, the lords of the Seven Kingdoms would rise up to serve him. They would roar for justice and fight against a usurper for the Targaryen Iron Throne." Her slender white fingers gently brushed across the flowers. "My brother has always believed in this. I believe he was still believing it before he died. But now I know that my brother was just dreaming. Here, this land, more than a decade has passed. People in the Seven Kingdoms have recognized the Baratheon family's Iron Throne." She sighed softly. "Perhaps, the gods are kind and do not want to see King Viserys experience betrayal in person. If you were to encounter the cruel truth, he would go completely crazy." Sir Barristan comforted him. "As you said, more than a decade has passed. The usurper's power has become strong, and the lords who have Targaryen in their hearts have had to submit or hide." He added, "Even if another 10 or 20 years pass, Baratheon will not be able to conceal his identity as a usurper. No one mentions it, but it does not mean it has been forgotten." "My Highness." Daenerys took a step forward, and after walking for a long time, she stopped and looked at the old knight. "Sir, do you want me to take back the Iron Throne?" Sir Barristan pondered for a moment, and said, "I will be honest with you. As a redeemer, I really want to see the world return to its original state. The fight for the Iron Throne represents danger. As a redeemer, I want to see your peace more." He touched his chest and saluted. "If you want to take back the Targaryen Iron Throne, I will gallop on the battlefield for you without fear of sacrifice. If not, I will hold my sword and guard your safety day and night." He nodded slightly. "Barristan Selmy is at your disposal, Princess Daenerys. Thank you for your honesty, sir." After a pause, Daenerys continued, "My fiancé told me that he will reveal my true identity, Daenerys Targaryen, at our wedding. He also told me that time will not exceed a year." The calm old knight was stunned for a moment and said, "As far as I know, your fiancé is not an impulsive person. He should be very clear about the consequences of this action. I admit that your fiancé is a powerful knight, but no matter how powerful the knight is, he cannot resist the siege of the usurpers." Daenerys' mouth curled slightly. "I have also had concerns, but his love gave me courage." The always steady old knight was stunned again. He had to give frank advice. "I have no intention of offending. The usurpers who are now fighting for their own interests will reunite because of the emergence of Targaryen. Earl Green is not their opponent." Glancing at Sir Barristan, who looked worried, Daenerys asked, "Sir, can the usurpers' army conquer the swamps and valleys of the Crab Claw Peninsula?" Without waiting for Sir Barristan's answer, she continued, "Can the usurpers' army break through the bloody gate of the Vale?" "Sir, I am Stormborn. My impression of my family comes from Viserys' words. I am honest. I have not forgotten the hatred for the Targaryen family, but I cannot feel strong hatred in my heart." "But," her skirt fluttered, Daenerys turned around, looking at Sir Barristan with a pair of violet eyes, "If they disrupt my life, when my 3 children grow up, they will have to pay with blood." Sir Barristan opened his mouth and said in surprise, "Children? Children?" 3. Chapter 277 The Most Precious Gem. Outside the government hall, seeing Sir Barristan finally appear, Jorah Mormont immediately walked over. Sir Jorah nodded slightly to the old knight and was about to walk past him, but was stopped by a hand. "Bear Island people, Her Royal Highness the Princess did not summon you." Sir Jorah was stunned for a moment. He seemed unbelievable. "Why? You are lying. She can't not see me." Sir Barristan frowned slightly. "This is the order of Her Royal Highness the Princess. Jorah Mormont, although Her Royal Highness the Princess did not cancel your exile." Chapter 207, She forgave your crime of telling on others, which is a great mercy. Looking at Sir Jorah, who still had an unbelievable look on his face, he added, "She also rewarded you with 2 large boxes of gold dragons. You should be grateful." Sir Jorah's tone was full of complaints. "I risked my life for Her Royal Highness the Princess. Old man, you should know very well how dangerous this mission is. We can come back alive, which is the blessing of the new and old gods." Sir Barristan frowned and said, "Loyalty is glory, and an honorable knight does not ask for anything in return. The princess rewards us for our loyalty. That is her generosity and kindness." His deep eyes looked straight at Sir Jorah. "I am puzzled by your behavior now. Mormont, you should not throw away your little remaining honor." Sir Jorah's eyes swept across the extra blood-red cloak and sword on Barristan's body, and he said angrily, "You are not worthy to talk about honor with me, the running dog of the usurper." Sir Barristan's wrinkled big hand solemnly swept across the cloak and sword on his body, and said, "I admit my stupidity, and I also admit that I am unworthy of honor. I will always be a sinner, and I will die with a smile on the road of atonement." After a pause, Sir Jorah said with a painful expression, "I don't want honor and treasure, I just ask to stay in Dany." Sir Barristan interrupted coldly, "She is now Princess Rhaella of Midsummer Isle. You should know very well what this means. I will never allow anyone to put her in danger." The informer of Bear Island who has just been forgiven. Sir Jorah clenched his fists tightly. "Old man, I will never betray Her Royal Highness the Princess. You are insulting her." Sir Barristan's expression was still cold. "In that case, stop your childish and ridiculous behavior." After a moment of silence, Sir Jorah loosened his fists, as if begging, "I only ask to stay with Her Royal Highness the Princess." Sir Barristan stared at Sir Jorah with a begging face. "You are too selfish. Your selfishness may humiliate the honor of Her Royal Highness the Princess. I will keep an eye on you, Bear Islander." Sir Jorah stared at Sir Barristan and gritted his teeth and said, "Old man, I don't need your preaching. Don't ignore my warning." Sir Barristan put his hand on the hilt of his sword and said, "We have fought side by side. You should know. Although I am old, my sword can still cut you as easily as cutting cheese." The former informer, Jorah Mormont. The next day, the sun had just risen. and the golden sunlight sprinkled on the sea, sparkling, as if covered with a layer of golden gauze. The waves gently hit the hull of the Black Pearl, making a soft sound. Mr. Al from Crab Claw Peninsula entered the cabin where Daenerys was, holding a thick book and trembling. Daenerys, who was sitting at the table, looked up from the book she had opened and said, "Thank you, respected Mr. R." After paying his respects, Mr. R blinked and said, "It is an honor for me to be your teacher." The old man is very energetic, Your Highness. Daenerys pursed her lips and smiled, saying, "Mr. R, thank you." Mr. R sat down tremblingly and said, "Your Highness, shall I continue to tell you about the history of the Vale today?" Daenerys nodded slightly and said, "Yes, it is the part one I need to learn the most now." Rustling, Mr. R turned the pages and said, "Okay, maybe you don't have to be so anxious. Learning requires patience. It's like walking, one step at a time," he suggested. "How about listening to some interesting things that happened in the Vale today?" "Thank you for your advice." Daenerys leaned back in her chair, paused, and said, "I just thought. I will soon govern the Vale on behalf of Green." She exhaled lightly and continued, "I'm worried that I won't be able to do well. After all, I have no experience in governing. I'll be honest with you, actually. I'm nervous too. When I was chosen as the Maester of the Whispering Keep by the Citadel 50 years ago, when I began to teach Lord Green to read, even not long ago, I never dreamed that I would become the Maester of the Ruler of the Vale." Mr. Al grinned, revealing his few remaining teeth. "Old man, I'm not ready either. The gods in heaven are my witness." Daenerys couldn't help but smile and said, "I believe him," the old Maester said kindly. "Trust is the most precious gem in the world. You and he trust each other. Under your and his rule, the Vale will be stable and peaceful." In Riverrun, in the inn booked by Tyrion Lannister, Edmure Tully shook a wine glass in his hand and said, "Lord Tyrion, King Robb will summon you soon. I estimate it will take 2 or 3 days, or even more days." Tyrion's eyes rolled and said, "Lord Edmure, can you set a time to meet me?" After taking a sip of wine, he continued, "I want to comfort poor Sir Jaime with beauty and wine as soon as possible." Edmure hesitated and said, "Perhaps I can mention it to King Robb to see if Sir Jaime's treatment can be improved." "Thank you for your kindness, you are a kind lord." Changing his tone, Tyrion reminded, "But are you sure King Stark has time to care about such trivial matters now?" Edmure scratched his hair and said, "You know." Tyrion chuckled. He picked up the golden wine jug and poured wine into Edmure's glass while saying, "At least I can hear the servants in the inn talking about the beauty of the new queen. They say she is very charming." After a pause, he said sharply, "I think King Stark's change of marriage partner has confirmed this." There were only the two of them in the room. Tyrion lowered his voice and said, "I heard that you are going to marry a lady from the Frey family on behalf of your nephew." Edmure seemed very surprised. "You even know this?" Tyrion poured wine into his glass and said with a grin, "Ah, I also heard this news from the servants in the inn. I guess most people know it." Edmure sighed and said, "As Robb's uncle, I must help him." Tyrion nodded in agreement and said, "When I was the Prime Minister in King's Landing, my biggest task was to clean up the shit that my nephew, the king, had pulled." Edmure and Tyrion looked at each other, and then they drank the wine in their glasses silently. When they drank the 7th glass, Edmure suddenly said, "Lord Tyrion, do you think all the ladies of the Frey family are as ugly as Lord Frey?" Although his uncle had promised to help him talk to Lord Frey about this matter, Edmure was still full of worries. Tyrion's eyes moved slightly, and he said, "Lord Frey has married so many wives, he must have had some beautiful daughters, right?" Before Edmure had time to be happy, he laughed again. "But why would he give you a beautiful daughter? I heard that Lord Frey is not a broad-minded person. I guess he will choose a daughter who is difficult to marry off to vent his anger." Chapter 278 Love Each Other Forever. Edmure Tully opened his mouth and said, "Lord Tyrion, you are right. If it were me, I would do the same." "Oh." Tyrion saw that Edmure was hiding his panic with a sigh, and he had a hard time holding back his laughter. After a moment of silence, Tyrion reached out for the wine pot, poured the wine and said, "My friend, don't be too sad." Actually, the corners of his mouth could not help but curl up slightly. "It's the same night without candles." Edmure looked up and said weakly, "This is my wife. She will also be the mother of my children. It's different." After saying that, he raised the glass painfully, paused for a while, sighed again, and then drank it all. Tyrion continued to pour wine for Edmure. His eyes rolled. It was the 10th glass. During the time he had been in contact with Edmure, Tyrion knew that the heir of Riveren was in the best condition at the moment. He was easy to listen to others' advice and easy to express his true feelings. While pouring the wine, Tyrion glanced at Edmure, whose eyes were a little dazed, with one black eye and one green eye, and said, "Lord Edmure, I have to agree with you." He put down the wine jug. "As a half Lannister, my biggest dream is for my beautiful wife to give birth to a son as majestic as Jaime." He seemed to be sighing. "This is what I can think of, the only way to prevent my son from hating me. After all, I can't be a tall father, but at least I can give my child a beautiful mother." Edmure agreed very much. "Yes, I'm more worried that the future Lady of Trout will become the object of ridicule by others." "Oh, the seven gods." Tyrion's eyes moved slightly, as if he was trying his best to comfort him. "Perhaps, I guessed wrong. After all, you are the heir to Riveren. The Freys are your vassals, and they should not dare to offend you." "I'm not a lord of the Freys yet," Edmure first denied it, and then continued, "Lord Tyrion, old Frey is the most stingy man in the Seven Kingdoms. You must be right in your guess." "I can guarantee it." Tyrion sighed helplessly and raised his glass to signal, "May the gods bless you." After taking a sip of wine, he continued, "May the old seven gods bless me. I guessed wrong." Edmure raised his glass and took a big sip, saying, "Thank you for your kind words, Lord Tyrion. But I know that this is just, based on my understanding of old Frey." "Oh, it can only be a good wish." Tyrion did not continue to comfort him. He shook the wine glass in his hand. He suddenly wondered, "I know the position of the twins is very important, but aren't you a little too, how should I put it, too much attention? After all, the Frey family is just a vassal of the Tully family." Edmure's eyes showed vigilance, but Tyrion acted unaware on his face, and continued, "I think it was this war that made the status of the Frey family so important. If there were no war, Lord Frey would be so happy to be able to marry the heir to Riveren." His tone was filled with emotion. "It's a pity that Lord Tywin married my charming sister Cersei to a Baratheon. If she had married to Riveren, at least she wouldn't have to be a widow. Well, none of the troubles we are facing now would have happened." Edmure seemed a little surprised. "Your sister is the Regent Queen Mother. No woman can be more noble than her, a woman who is often beaten by her husband." Tyrion leaned forward towards Edmure and lowered his voice slightly. "Robert is a drunkard. My sister is pitiful." Edmure couldn't believe it. As a king, he actually attacks his own queen? "Is this true?" Tyrion's voice was a little sad. "We are friends, so I tell you the truth, Lord Edmure," he added. "Robert Baratheon's warhammer is known to all in the Seven Kingdoms. This is why Jaime and I have been staying in the Red Castle. You can never guess what crazy things a drunkard will do. It's really pitiful. I have heard some rumors. I thought they were just... I didn't expect Robert I to be." Edmure didn't say anything more. It was the Tully family's upbringing not to speak ill of others behind their backs. This was what his father had taught him since he was a child. Seeing that Tyrion, who usually liked to laugh, now looked sad because of his sister's tragic experience, he comforted him. "Lord Tyrion, at least she is living a good life now. No woman can be more noble than her." Tyrion glanced at the kind-hearted Edmure, shook his head slightly, and sighed. "Lord Edmure, you only see her superficial glory. Her current situation is actually more pitiful." As he said, Tyrion stopped talking. Edmure reached out and patted Tyrion's little shoulder. "It's okay, I will be a good listener. We are friends, Tyrion." Tyrion nodded gratefully, took a sip of wine, and said, "Robert I is dead, Joffrey has sat on the Iron Throne, and Lord Tywin thinks my sister is no longer valuable." His eyes looked at the heir of Riveren. "Edmure, you should know what this means." Edmure's eyes widened slightly. "This, how is this possible?" Tyrion couldn't guess what Edmure was thinking specifically, but he also achieved the result he wanted, so, it doesn't matter. He closed his eyes in pain. The Light of the West, the most beautiful woman in the Seven Kingdoms, is now regarded as a worthless thing by my cruel father. Sister Cersei has loved me the most since I was a child, but I am a dwarf without courage and useless. There is no Sir Jaime, let alone the legendary knight, to save the bird imprisoned in the Tower of Meager." There was a hint of hatred in his voice. "My father has no family affection. He treats his children as goods in exchange for his power. He only has power in his eyes." This is indeed consistent with what Edmure has always heard about Lord Tywin. "Jaime." Edmure's blue eyes moved slightly, and he asked tentatively, "Tyrion, do you think Jaime can save your sister?" What did Edmure guess from Tyrion's words? He thought that Lord Tywin would drive Cersei Lannister out of the Red Castle and make her a nun of the Seven Gods. This was the worst result he could think of. What was Edmure testing at this moment? Because Tyrion just mentioned Jaime Lannister, he was a little suspicious that Tyrion's words were a lie to save Ser Jaime. Hearing Edmure's blatant words of temptation, Tyrion couldn't help but sigh in his heart. The naivety of the heir of Reverin in front of him made him actually feel cute. Well, but it's not bad. If there is no war, at least there will be no big problem in inheriting and keeping the family. After all, it is impossible for everyone to be the man who is looting the valley. Retracting his thoughts, Tyrion said bitterly, Jaime has become a prisoner. In the eyes of my father, he is a son who has tarnished the honor of the Lannisters. He shook his head and continued, I think Jaime is also very clear that Duke Tywin always values the honor of the Lannister family. He will not forgive anyone. Even his own children. He scratched his hair. I guess the best outcome for Jaime is to be a kingsguard who never marries a wife or has children, and always protects his grandson King. Edmure's doubts were eliminated. Combined with the information he knew, he could judge that Tyrion did not lie to him. He took a sip of wine silently. The heir of House Tully really could not understand the family affection of the Lannisters, or the fatherly love of Lord Tywin. After a moment of silence, Tyrion seemed to have finally made up his mind. He reached out and grabbed Edmure's wrist, and said sincerely, Edmure, now, only you can save my sister, you are her true knight. Edmure almost dropped the wine glass in his hand and said, what do you mean? Tyrion nodded sincerely and said, let's end the war in the entire Seven Kingdoms, only you can do it, Lord Edmure. Edmure did not move. He opened his eyes wide and said, Tyrion, I consider you my friend, but you want me to betray my nephew? Tyrion shook his head slightly. He stared at Edmure and said, no betrayal, we are friends, I promise. After this fight, Robb Stark will still be the king in the north, and you, he increased the strength of his grip on Edmure's wrist slightly, put on the crown of the King of the Trident and marry the most beautiful woman in the Seven Kingdoms, Cersei Lannister. She will become your queen and give birth to beautiful children for you. His eyes were full of sincerity. Edmure, become my brother-in-law, let us become a family, put an end to this chaos. Tully, Stark, Lannister will love each other forever. There was a pleading in his voice, for my sister, Knight Edmure. Chapter 279 Another situation. Tyrion looked at Edmure, who was shocked, and raised one eyebrow slightly, and then said, although my sister has been married, she is still radiant white. The old man of the seven gods favors her. His eyes were sincere, and Tyrion suddenly felt in his heart. He was like a female boss who recommended female branches to guests. His face must be full of flattery now. Maybe, he will go to Châtain, the boss of the largest female branch in King's Landing, to find a job for fun. Well, he missed she's perky face. Tyrion Lannister immediately retracted his thoughts that were about to go astray, and he winked at Edmure jokingly. Edmure Tully shook his lips for a while, and with the action of raising the glass, he moved his body, took a big sip of wine, and said, Tyrion, your joke today is not funny at all. Edmure looked away, shaking his right leg as if he didn't care. Tyrion stared at Edmure in silence. After a pause, Edmure's blue eyes moved slightly, first looking at Tyrion, then immediately retracting his gaze and said, because we are friends, I can pretend that I didn't hear it. Tyrion, seeing Edmure's little action, Tyrion's mouth corners were barely noticeable. He saw that the heir of Reverin was already moved. Although, before he finished speaking, Tyrion sighed deeply and continued, I am still very grateful to you, Edmure. In Edmure's eyes, Tyrion rubbed his face, forced a smile, and turned to other topics. Listening to the interesting stories of Tyrion and the beauty that he usually loved to hear, Edmure felt more and more uncomfortable at this moment. He actually wanted to hear more about Cersei's story. When drinking the 13th glass of summer red, watching Tyrion talking non-stop, Edmure felt a little irritated. Did the usually clever half-Lannister see that he wanted to continue talking about his sister, Cersei Lannister? When it came to the 15th glass of summer red, Edmure could no longer hold back. He first coughed lightly to attract Tyrion's attention, then he tried his best to pretend not to care and said, Tyrion, my friend, are you telling the truth? Facing Tyrion's puzzled look, the heir of House Tully reminded him slightly, well, I mean, your sister was trapped in the Mead Tower. Hearing Edmure's words, Tyrion was stunned for a moment, holding the wine glass in his hand, motionless in silence for a while, then nodded. Then he leaned back in his chair, stared toward the window, and said slowly, it's true, my father doesn't want Cersei to appear in front of Joffrey. He thinks a mother can easily make her son weak. Edmure blurted out, How can this be? This is still, this, Tyrion shrugged and said, this is Tywin Lannister, my kind father. He has only one requirement for his children, obey any of his orders, whether you like it or not. Edgemure sympathized with Cersei's experience and murmured, although her husband has passed away, she is already the mother of a child, shouldn't Alice? Tyrion, I have no right to judge anything, my friend, don't be too sad. Tyrion tapped his chin lightly. He raised his glass with a sad face, but privately enjoyed the sweetness of summer red. He exhaled and said, Robert has never let my sister experience the true love of a couple, until now. She is not only beautiful as a girl, but also still retains the pure heart of a girl. He paused, raised his hand to wipe the corner of his eyes, and smiled bitterly. Before I set out for King's Landing, Cersei still firmly believed one day, the knight in the poem would rescue her from the Tower of Meader. For that day, for that night, she dressed herself up beautifully every day. I am proud of my sister's beautiful heart, but also sad for her innocence. Tyrion wiped the corner of his eyes again. I am really useless. I don't have the courage to resist my father. I am sorry for my sister's love for me. Edgemure felt the same way. If it were him. If his sister was trapped and he had no good way to rescue her, he would definitely be anxious and crazy. He guessed that because they had a cold-blooded father like Lord Tywin, who only cared about power, the relationship between the Lannister siblings must be as deep as that of the Tully siblings. The atmosphere became dull. Edgemure opened his mouth and reluctantly comforted, your sister is the king's mother after all, the king's mother. He repeated it again in his heart. Edgemure's abdomen suddenly felt a little hot. He quickly suppressed the sudden strange feeling and continued, everyone is watching. I don't think Lord Tywin would dare to go too far. If he cared about other people's eyes, he would not be Lord Tywin, and there would be no rainy season in Castamere. Tyrion's tone was sarcastic. If Lord Frey can help Lord Tywin, I guarantee that my father will immediately send Cersei to Lord Frey's bed without hesitation. Imagining that scene, the good-tempered Edgemure suddenly had the urge to kill. He silently drank the wine and suppressed the emotion surging in his heart. Tyrion scratched his hair, which looked like a mess of grass. Because of the Seven Gouts preference, Cersei has the most beautiful face in the Seven Kingdoms, but she has not been given the love and affection that even ordinary women can enjoy. He looked at Edgemure, who was looking at him intently, and said, to be honest, I have never seen a woman more beautiful than my sister. He lowered his voice slightly. Her toes are all masterpieces of the seven gods in the mortal world. He sighed softly. Perhaps this is the price she pays for having the best beauty in Westeros. At this moment, the image of Cersei in Edgemure's mind became more real. She was as stunningly beautiful as the rumors said, and still very weak. She needed the protection of a knight, which was salvation. Perhaps, he was the knight she had been waiting for. No, he was, and he could do it. Edgemure Tully had been very well behaved since he was a child, but today, he had to make a decision alone. It might be a little impulsive, but he could no longer suppress the love that welled up in his heart. He didn't want to regret it for the rest of his life. Edgemure stood up from his chair and said to Tyrion, my friend, I will go talk to my father about Cersei Lannister. Without waiting for Tyrion's response, he took a step forward, like a warrior heading to the battlefield. I will go now. Tyrion's outstretched hand stopped there. He stared at Edgemure's back in a daze until he completely disappeared. He murmured, good luck to you. After that, he burped for a long time. Not long after Edgemure left, footsteps were heard, and Sir Adam Marbrand, wearing black armor, Jaime's childhood friend, escorted Tyrion to Riverine on the orders of Lord Tywin. Chapter 258, walked in. Sir Adam stood in front of Tyrion, stared at him for a while, and said, Tyrion, what are you planning? Tyrion took a sip of wine and said drunkenly, do you like eavesdropping, sir? In response to Tyrion's ridicule, Sir Adam had a blank expression. I'm not a fool. Your Sellsworth guards deliberately let me hear your conversation. Tyrion grinned. This is not a good excuse. If he is a real knight, he will definitely refuse my kindness. Sir Adam clenched his fists and said, I will report everything you say and do in Riverine to Lord Tywin. This is my duty. Chapter 280 Family Interests. Tyrion Lannister's tongue was unforgiving. You want to tell me that you gave up the excellent character of a knight for the so-called duty, right, sir? Sir Adam's icy face turned into an angry look. When he tightened his grip on the hilt of his sword, a lazy voice sounded behind him, hey, if you draw your sword, you will die. Tyrion raised his glass to the direction behind Sir Adam and said, Bronn, You are here just in time, my reliable captain of the guard." Bronn walked over slowly with one hand behind his back and a dagger in his hand. He bowed and saluted, raised his head and looked at Tyrion, his face full of obscene smiles. "Master Tyrion, I am at your command at any time." Seeing Bronn's face, Tyrion was always worried that he would defect on the spot, and every time he had to give a bag of gold dragons to make himself feel a little relieved. He habitually touched the purse on his waist, but the action suddenly stopped. Now is not the time to buy safety, there are outsiders. He raised his eyebrows at Bronn, who seemed to understand all of a sudden, and his smile became even more obscene. Sir Adam turned his head to look at Bronn and said coldly, "I don't like dirty mercenaries." Tyrion grinned and said, "Don't forget the Battle of King's Landing. It was Bronn who helped me defeat Stannis. When we return to King's Landing, he will be a Blackwater knight anointed with holy oil by the High Septon himself." As Tyrion finished speaking, Bronn swung his right arm and saluted Tyrion again gracefully. "Thank you, Master Tyrion, for your support," Sir Adam said contemptuously. "You are just a lucky mercenary. This can't change your dirty background." Sir Adam had shoulder-length dark copper hair, and Bronn's smile deepened. "I'm not a delicate flower like you. Tonight I'm going to hold your head, and by the way, let my juice fill your mouth." Bronn's hand grabbed the hilt of the dagger at his waist. "What a pervert." Tyrion couldn't help but shudder. He sneered and said, "Bronn, I'm sorry, Sir Adam is a dog sent by my father, and I can't give you his head yet." Bronn withdrew his hand with a smile. "As you command, my noble lord." Sir Adam looked at Tyrion and said angrily, "Tyrion, you are insulting me." Tyrion grinned, "Knight of the Marbrand family, it is your honor to be insulted by noble Lannister lion." "You?" Sir Adam's face flushed. Tyrion waved his hand and said, "Back off, report my conspiracy to Lord Tywin quickly. Hurry up and don't let the kind father worry about his well-behaved son. He is not a strong young man. You should consider our master in the West more." Sir Adam snorted coldly, flicked the red cloak of the Lannister family, turned around, and strode away. After Sir Adam left, Bronn picked up the flagon, poured wine into the cup Edmure had used, shook the cup, drank a sip of wine gracefully, and said, "Lord Tyrion, are you serious?" With a snap, Bronn's other hand nimbly caught the purse thrown by Tyrion, weighed it, and immediately smiled. He put down the cup, stepped back a few steps facing Tyrion, and stood there respectfully. Tyrion grinned, "It seems that I have successfully stopped your treacherous heart again." Bronn responded with a smile, "Master Tyrion, you are both generous and wise, and I will always be yours. At least I believe that your loyalty today will not change." Tyrion adjusted his hair that he had deliberately messed up in front of Edmure, and said, "Bronn, my dear father kicked me off the Prime Minister's chair, and Sir Jacqueline died in the battle." Commander-in-Chief of the Gold Cloaks, Chapter 258, "Lord Tywin would not leave such a delicious cake for me." Tyrion moved his body and leaned back in the chair more comfortably, and then said, "You also know that my sister the Queen Mother loves me to death. I'm sure she is looking forward to my return in King's Landing." He spread his hands. "Cersei will not let me go, including the people around me. Your head can also excite my sister the Queen Mother." Bronn smiled obscenely again and said, "If death is inevitable, I choose to die under the skirt of a beauty." Tyrion ignored Bronn's teasing. He said seriously, "I will not sit and wait to die. Not only must we rescue Jaime, we must also save ourselves." Bronn restrained his smile, thought for a moment, and said, "Lord Tyrion, didn't you plan to marry Queen Cersei to the heir to Highgarden?" Tyrion gently shook the wine glass. He stared at the fine ripples in the glass and said slowly, "I'm just in case. There was one situation before defeating Stannis, and another after defeating Stannis. Cersei will not surrender easily. At least everyone knows that she still has a sword in her hand." After a pause, he continued, "As long as the benefits are rich enough, Cersei's sword will become very sharp. When my sister the Queen is willful, she will choose to ignore it. I will not underestimate her." Bronn's eyes moved slightly, and he said, "That famous general, Earl Crab." Tyrion looked up at Bronn, nodded, and said, "We can't ignore his other identity. He is Cersei's chief of staff and has always been." Bronn smiled and said, "Isn't Lord Crab your friend?" "Yes, he is a friend." Tyrion climbed down from the chair, stretched himself, and said, "But I can't afford a higher price than my sister. Cersei is the Queen Regent, and I am not a Prime Minister. I can't give Green what she can give." He grinned, "Including warmth and bed." The mercenary Bronn nodded in understanding. "Lord Tyrion, if it were me, I would also stand on the side of the Queen Mother. No one can resist the temptation of power and beauty. Tyrion put his hands behind his back and walked towards the window, saying as he walked, so, only when Cersei leaves King's Landing will I dare to join forces with Lord Green with confidence. Bronn followed behind Tyrion, scratched his cheek, and said, it's so complicated. Standing in front of the window, Tyrion stared at the sky for a while and said, Lord Tywin needs a stable 7 kingdoms. Otherwise, he can only watch the Tyrell family grow bigger, which is not on the interests of the Lannister family. The obstructing dark clouds dispersed, revealing dazzling sunlight. Tyrion squinted his eyes slightly and added, if we can resolve the issue of the Riverlands and the North through marriage, Lord Tywin will never give up this opportunity, because it is in the best interests of the Lannister family. As a well-behaved son of a kind father, I will naturally serve him. Tyrion turned to look at Bronn. As a loving brother of a gentle sister, I will naturally choose a good husband and a warm new home for her. Bronn scratched his head and said, my lord, I have to admit, your family has a really good relationship. Tyrion laughed. Don't envy the Lannisters' love for each other. Bronn seemed to be sighing. My lord. I'm a little glad that my father is an alcoholic who doesn't care about anything. I'll have to apologize to him for my ignorance when I get a chance. After a pause, Bronn suddenly said, so, that's why you told me to leave Sir Adam a chance to eavesdrop. Tyrion nodded slightly. In my father's eyes, I am a playboy. He trusts his bannerman more than his own son. Bronn couldn't help but sigh again. They really love each other. I said, don't be too envious. I'm hungry. Let's find something to eat. Let's go. Although Bronn was puzzled about Tyrion's next step, he has never been very curious. He silently followed Tyrion and moved towards the direction of the restaurant. Chapter 281 Green's Next Step. In the Duke's study in the Eagle's Nest, Green Crab, Baron Greven, and Maester Erlyn were discussing the government affairs of the valley. Maester Erlyn flipped the paper in his hand and said, my lord, according to the report of the acting governor of Seagull Town, the musicals throughout Seagull Town have been promoting your reputation and kindness recently, and most of those troops are from the River Reach. Looking at the paper in his hand again, he continued, the acting governor reported that 16 troops from the River Reach have almost booked all the stages in Seagull Town, and are fully scheduled for performances every day. Except for the stages for the nobles to watch, the open-air stages in the square will not charge the audience a single copper star, and even distribute bread for free to attract the public. He suspects that this is an intentional arrangement, but has not yet investigated the true purpose of those people. Grevenhurst looked at Maester Erlyn in confusion. Erlyn, has Seagull Town investigated the specific employers? Maester Erlyn shook his head slightly and said, the ravens from Seagull Town have not sent any other information. Now we only know that they are all from the River Reach. Baron Greven thought for a moment and said, it can also be said that they have told the answer. The employers of those troops are likely to be people from the River Reach. Green's steady voice sounded, it's the Tyrell family of the Riverlands. Golden Rose, Baron Greven said, nonsense in surprise. Green tapped his chin lightly and said, the friendship between Marigold and Golden Rose is deep. The corners of his mouth curved slightly, and he added, before, most of the rations for Crab's Legion came from the generous support of Golden Rose. Baron Greven was stunned for a moment, and tried to suppress the corners of his mouth that were about to curl up, and said, my lord, you and Duke Tyrell. Before he could think of what to say, Green said, military victory is the most important step. He tapped his fingers on the wide armrests. Now, the Red Keep has the support of Queen Cersei and King Joffrey, and the support of the Duke of Highgarden in the south. No one can shake Crab's rule over the Vale. After Green's voice fell, Baron Greven said, my lord, you will always be the master of the Vale. The Hirsch family will always be at your disposal and will always be loyal to you, and the gods in heaven are witnesses. Maester Erlyn echoed, you have opened a new chapter in great history, my lord. Green raised his eyebrows slightly. Sure enough, compared to the vassals of the Crab Claw Peninsula, the vassals of the Vale are more educated. He motioned to Brienne to pour wine for the three of them, and said, we are still one piece of paper away from Crab's legal rule. Maester Erlyn added, the legitimacy recognized by the king and the Privy Council will be beneficial to your rule in the Vale. Thank you. Green picked up the full glass of wine poured by Brienne, took a sip, and said, so, we have to help Prime Minister Tywin in the Riverlands, which will make things easier. Griffin nodded in agreement, but Maester Erlyn hesitated and said, my lord, if you want to start a war, I suggest you wait for a while, at least until the harvest season in the Vale is over. He looked up at Green, who was silent. opened his mouth, and continued. It is best to wait until the Moongate tournament, chapter 264, is over. At that time, there will be new Vale Knights who are loyal to you and belong to you to serve you. Licking his dry lips, he added, the flat land in the Riverlands is very suitable for cavalry galloping. Baron Greven looked at Mr. Erlen with wrinkles on his face, glared at him, and said, Mr. Lord Green is invincible. Mr. Erlen did not argue with Baron Greven's words. The Meester was the Lord's advisor and he was just performing his duties. The tournament at Moongate Castle is very important. After a pause, Green said, the most important thing for the valley is stability and recovery. The crab soldiers here will not be mobilized. I will only take 100 valley cavalry and crab soldiers to the Bloodgate. Mr. Erlen looked at his lord. Lord Green, please forgive me for being so presumptuous. Are you planning to directly mobilize the soldiers from Crab Claw Peninsula? Green put down his wine glass and said, my loyal Meester, you don't have to worry about the problem of troops. Crab Claw Peninsula is a special territory. Every citizen there is an excellent warrior. I can mobilize as many soldiers as I have citizens. He shrugged his shoulders helplessly and continued, the premise is that there is enough food. Since Mr. Erlen joined the Green Group, he has spent most of his time writing letters and sending out crows. Most of his knowledge of Crab Claw Peninsula comes from the books he has read, so it can be said that he knows very little. Hearing what Green said, the Meester's curiosity was aroused. He was about to ask more questions, but was interrupted by Baron Greven. Baron Greven bowed slightly to Green and said in a loud voice, Lord Green, my eldest son, second son and youngest son are at your disposal. I request to fight for you on their behalf. This is the highest honor of the Hershey family. Green's brown eyes seem to be able to see through people's hearts. Swords and guns on the battlefield have no eyes. Ryan, Baron Greven's eldest son, is very reliable. Let him stay in the valley. Baron Greven was moved, and he saluted again. Thank you for your kindness, my lord. Green looked at Mr. Erlen. In a few days, Mr. Al of Whispering Castle will arrive in Eagle's Nest. You can ask him for details about Crab Claw Peninsula territory. Green stood up from his chair, and Baron Greven and Mr. Erlen also stood up. Green walked slowly to Mr. Erlen and said, the area ruled by Kleber is getting bigger and bigger. As a ruler, I need more Meesters to form the Knights of the Heart. Meesters in Westeros are also called Knights of the Heart, to provide me with your rich knowledge at any time. After a pause, he continued, Mr. Al will be the chief Meester, and you will be appointed as my second Meester. Mr. Erlen was a little excited. He bowed and said, thank you for your trust. This is the honor of my life, Lord Green, the advisory Meester group. When Baron Greven was weighing the pros and cons in his heart, Green waved to him and said, Loyal Greven, come. The three of them stood together in front of a long table covered with a map of the Riverlands. Green pointed to the location of Maiden Spring with his finger and said, my people are already nearby. Green slowly narrated his next plan. There was no specific concept of counterintelligence in Westeros. This was his differential treatment of people he trusted. Lord Green's love for his subordinates is often full of patience and initiative. His requirements are also simple, as long as you don't let him down. After explaining the plan, Green listened to Baron Greven's sincere advice. His goal stopped at a location on the map, the western neighbor of Crab Claw Peninsula, Crow's Roost. Riverlands, Riverine. Robb Stark groaned in a muffled voice. In the slightly dim room, the candlelight flickered. After a breath, Robb paused, climbed down the wide wooden bed, reached out and picked up the black robe. Putting on the robe, Robb's pair of blue eyes moved to Jean Westerling, who was crawling on the bed. His eyes slowly swept over Jean's curves, smiled, and said, my Jean, if you don't cover yourself with something, you may run into Stark's raid again. A pleasant and seductive laugh sounded, and Jean lay on her side, supporting her flushed face with one hand. A pair of moist eyes looked at Robb from top to bottom, and Jean's voice was slightly hoarse. Poor Miss Westerling, I don't believe that she will be attacked by the Stark Knights for the fourth time today. Robb grinned, you will regret it. I plan to change my position this time unless you beg for mercy. Jean's eyes were fixed on Robb's waist, and she said hoarsely, the brave women of Westerling never beg for mercy. Robb picked up the leather wine bag, stared at the fearless Jean, and took a big sip of the northern liquor. Throwing away the wine bag casually, Robb was about to move his feet, but there was a hurried knock on the door. Then, the voice of Reynold Westerling, Jean's brother, sounded, Your Majesty, Earl Karstark killed Martin Lannister, Sir Kevin's third son. Now Robb's prisoner. Chapter 262. Chapter 282. The Heavy Crown. Robb Stark's eyes suddenly became sharp. He straightened his loose robe and said in a deep voice, "Come in." The door was pushed open, and Sir Reynard Westerling strode in. He glanced at his sister, who had just pulled the blanket to her thighs, and saluted to Robb. "Your Majesty." Robb nodded his chin slightly and called, "Loram, bring me my clothes." A childish boy's voice sounded outside the door. "As you wish, Your Majesty." Not long after, Loram Westerling came trotting in with clothes. He was Jean's younger brother, 9 years old this year, and was recently appointed as the king's attendant. Robb put on his leather coat. At this time, there was no anger on his face. He said, "Tell me everything you know, Sir Reynard." Seeing his younger brother standing behind the king, tiptoeing to just the back of his collar, Sir Reynard walked over to help. He began to speak. Rickard Karstark and his men suddenly broke into the cell where the prisoners were held, and Martin Lannister was killed on the spot. After receiving the news, Lord Umber Griegan arrested him. Robb frowned and said, "Did Rickard and Griegan have a conflict?" Sir Reynard was about to speak, but when he saw his sister in a long skirt coming over, he stopped helping and stood in front of Robb again, and replied respectfully, "Before Lord Umber arrived, 2 guards in the cell died. Later, I heard that some of their men were injured." After putting on his coat, Loram trotted over and brought a pair of black boots. Robb sat down and said, "Sir Reynard, gather all my vassals, I will try them in the main hall of the castle." After a pause, he said coldly, "Rickard Karstark, as you command, Your Majesty." Sir Reynard bowed and strode out of the room. Loram lifted one of Robb's legs and put on his boots with great effort, his forehead covered with sweat. Jean bent down to help, but was rejected by her younger brother. He whispered, "I can do it, I'll get the crown." Jean reached out and rubbed her stubborn brother's hair, then stood up and walked to another place. Outside the door of the Duke's bedroom in Riverrun, Brynden Tully's voice was filled with anger. "Edgemure, you should report this to King Robb first." A guilty look flashed across Edgemure Tully's face, and he explained, "I have to get my father's permission for my marriage." Looking at his uncle's blackened face, he whispered again, "After all, I am Robb's uncle, and it is not easy for me to discuss my marriage with my nephew." Sir Brynden said coldly, "My nephew, Robb, is your king. Don't forget, you have already promised King Robb to marry Miss Frey." Edgemure looked calm in the face of his uncle's accusations. He had already thought of a perfect way. His tone was as if he was seeking credit. "Uncle, if I married Cersei Lannister, there would be peace immediately. Without war, would Robb still have to be afraid of a small Frey family? Would I still have to marry an ugly woman from the old Frey family?" He murmured to himself, "The Frey family all looks like weasels." Sir Brynden stared at his complaining nephew for a while, frowned and corrected, "Edgemure, remember, King Robb was never afraid. He had to choose to appease Lord Frey for the sake of our kingdom." Edgemure quickly realized that he had said the wrong thing. He assured, "Uncle, I just made a slip of the tongue. You know, I have always been proud of my sister for giving birth to Robb. We are a family." He showed a proud look, "and I am very happy that this idea of mine can help Robb." Really, Brynden's brother, Hoster Tully, is the restless Duke of Riverrun, who is always traveling around the 7 kingdoms, so he has taken on many of his father's responsibilities on behalf of his brother, and therefore understands Edgemure very well. He was sure that Edgemure was attracted by Cersei's beauty first, and the rest was thought of later. But he was also sure that if this matter was not beneficial to the Tullys and the Starks, Edgemure would never insist on his own ideas. Family, responsibility, honor. The Tullys' family comes first. But Brynden sighed secretly. He had to admit that this matter had an attraction to the devastated Riverlands. Not long after, Brynden suddenly woke up from the sweet dream he had unconsciously fallen into. He stared at his nephew and said, "Edgemure, was this Lannister's idea?" Edgemure nodded. He did not think of hiding it. "Uncle, it was indeed Tyrion Lannister's suggestion." He looked left and right, approached Sir Brynden, and lowered his voice. "Lannister promised me that if the marriage is successful, Robb will still be the king in the north. And," he looked around again, and lowered his voice even lower, "Lannister even promised to let Tully wear the crown of the King of the Trident." Sir Brynden's pupils shrank suddenly, and Edgemure continued, "This is Lannister's conspiracy to alienate the Tully family and the Stark family. I have seen through it a long time ago." He curled his lips. "Robb is my nephew, how could I betray my family? Lannister especially wants to provoke us." Sir Brynden reminded directly. Edgemure, Lannister cannot be trusted. You shouldn't believe their tongues. Edgemure's blue eyes were as clear as lake water. He said in surprise, a conspiracy is a conspiracy, but how could the Lannisters lie about Cersei Lannister's marriage, uncle? Besides, Duke Tywin's eldest son is in our hands. The Lannisters would never dare to break their promise. Sir Brynden's eyes were deep. What if the condition of the marriage is that the Lannister envoy takes the king's lair away first? Can you still trust the Lannisters like you do now? Edgemure looked at Sir Brynden steadily for a while, and said, you can sign the agreed promise first under the witness of the gods. Sir Brynden sighed, and said, my child, if those things you said are useful, the Targaryens will not lose their Iron Throne. Think about the war 16 years ago. Edgemure didn't understand Sir Brynden's hint. Wasn't that war caused by the wrong spring? Wasn't it Prince Rhaegar who violated the honor first and insulted the Starks and Baratheons? And Aerys II, the Mad King, killed Ned's father and brother. The Tullys and the Starks are just... Sir Brynden stared at his nephew who couldn't grasp the key points for a while, and said, Edgemure, my dear nephew, please recall what the Lannisters did and how they did it at that time. After a pause, he said again, I haven't forgotten why we raised an army to fight against the Targaryens. There was a hint of anger in his voice. We are talking about the Lannisters. Edgemure's eyes were still full of confusion. Sir Brynden took a deep breath and said slowly, Lord Tywin entered Aerys II's King's Landing in the name of loyalty and in the name of protecting the Targaryen Iron Throne. Do you want me to tell you in detail what he did after entering the city? Edgemure thought his uncle was talking to him about the legitimacy of the Iron Throne. He scratched his head like he did when he was a child, smiled embarrassedly, and said, I understand, thank you. Uncle, I will be vigilant, and I will not easily believe the Lannisters' promises. Not just the Lannisters. Sir Brynden reached out and patted his nephew's arm, and continued, what I really want to tell you is, this is war. In times of war, anyone may do anything to defeat the opponent. In a chaotic situation, many people will choose, winning is more important than honor. Edgemure nodded solemnly. After a pause, Sir Brynden said again, Edgemure, come with me to meet the king. This kind of thing should be allowed by him in advance. You must ask the king for forgiveness. The two men started walking. Edgemure shrugged and said, I will. I will ask for forgiveness. Sir Brynden's face was weather-beaten. Time had stolen his reddish-brown hair, leaving only gray. As he walked, he worriedly advised, Edgemure, my child, although Robb is your nephew, you must remember that he is your king first. Edgemure made a promise. I know. I will definitely support him. Sir Brynden nodded and spoke again. A king is different from a feudal lord. Robb wore a heavy crown at a young age. At a time like this, he would easily be disgusted by things that offend the king's majesty. As his uncle, I hope that you will not only support him, but also understand his difficulties. As the uncle and nephew walked out of the gate, they heard the sound of hurried horse hoofs. Following the sound, they saw Sir Reynold riding over. Coming closer, Sir Reynard jumped off his horse and saluted, Lord Brynden, Lord Edgemure. His Majesty wants to try the murderer of the prisoners, Rickard Karstark, and he has ordered everyone to go to the main hall of the castle. Sir Brynden frowned and paused. He said, Sir, thank you for your help. We will be there in a moment. Edgemure looked at Sir Reynard leaving, and his face looked heavy for the first time. Sir Brynden asked puzzledly, what's wrong, Edgemure? Edgemure hesitated and looked at Sir Brynden. Uncle, let me tell you in advance, I'm not jealous of the Westerling siblings. Seeing Sir Brynden nod, he spoke, you see, Jean Westerling is Robb's future queen, Reynold Westerling is Robb's captain of the guard, and Loram Westerling is Robb's close attendant. He spread his hands. Westerling, I feel like Robb is about to be surrounded by the Westerlings. I don't know why, but when I think about this, my heart feels uneasy. He shrugged, I can't explain this feeling. Sir Brynden seemed relieved. I'm glad you can consider this, Edgemure. He stopped in front of the horse, reached out and touched the horse's neck, and said, our young king needs some time to grow up. He can only learn how to be a good king by himself. During this period, the Tullys are the king's most reliable guardians. Chapter 283 The Heavy Crown 2. In the main hall of Riverrun, huge marble columns supported the soaring ceiling, and the surrounding walls were covered with gorgeous tapestries depicting history, legends and family crests. On the high platform in the hall, Robb Stark, the King of the North and the Trident, sat on an oak chair with a high back and exquisitely carved patterns. On Robb's head, The copper and black iron sword crown emitted a dim light under the torch, casting a shadow and covering his eyes. The guards in grey robes carried Martin Lannister's body on their shoulders and carried it under the high platform. The hall with flickering candlelight suddenly fell silent. The traces of fighting can be clearly seen on the body. The arms are full of sword wounds left by blocking, and red liquid is still slowly flowing out of the wounds on the chest and lower abdomen, as if many toothless mouths all over the body are drooling. Edmure Tully stood to the king's right, one hand on the back of his father's throne. He looked away from the dais and glanced at Brynden Tully beside him. His uncle nodded his chin imperceptibly. Below the dais, Roose Bolton stood in front of the northern bannerman, his face still as if he had not seen the bodies not far away. King Robb looked down, and after a long moment, his eyes left the bloody bodies. There was no emotion in his voice. "Reynold, tell the Grecian to bring them in, as you command." Reynold Westerling turned around, his footsteps echoing in the gloomy stone hall. Not long after, the escort Grecian appeared. He had many similarities with a prisoner in his hands, also tall, with a thick beard and long hair that fell past his shoulders. A dozen people followed closely behind them. They were all wearing mail or ring-mail shirts made of iron rings, long boots, and thick cloaks, some of which were made of wool and some of which were made of natural animal fur. The prisoners could only be identified by whether they held weapons in their hands. 2 of the Great John's men were injured, and 3 of the captives were stabbed. Yesterday, to be exact, not long ago, they were brothers who fought side by side and drank together. The North is a cold and harsh place. The descendants of the ancestors who have grown up there for generations have no mercy. They only recognize the lords they recognize. When the captives stood quietly and paused, King Robb's voice came from above. "Grecian, are there only 5 people?" Grecian's groan was like a bell. "King Robb, we killed 2 when we captured them, and another one was seriously injured. He was dying, so we didn't bring him." King Robb's eyes moved to the prisoners below. "You 8 strong men went to kill an unarmed 13-year-old captive." At this time, seeing his uncle's eyes signaling to him, Edmure hurriedly raised his voice. "They also murdered 2 guards of the Tully family in order to enter the cell." After saying that, Edmure glanced at his uncle as if to seek credit. Sir Brynden pretended not to see it. The reason he asked Edmure to speak was to be on the safe side. The ancestors of the North were not only stubborn, but also reckless, and Robb was still a novice in the game of power. He was worried that his nephew-grandson king would be forced to kill people. As the king of the sword crown with copper and black iron, he has the power to punish those who break the law, but the man below is Rickard Karstark. Karstark is a branch family of the Stark family. And that man is also a vassal of Robb's father. Sir Brynden's eyes trembled. The wolf pack cannot have 2 wolf heads for a long time. Robb and his father must meet as soon as possible, otherwise the vassals of the North will split sooner or later. Regardless of size, every lord has selfish desires, and this cannot be easily solved by relying on a father-son relationship. Brynden's deep eyes slowly swept over Earl Bolton and other northern vassals. There may be people with greater ambitions hiding there. Something is wrong today. He suspects that the simple-minded Earl Karstark may have been instigated by someone with ulterior motives. "Lord Edmure, that was not murder." Earl Rickard refuted the accusation of the heir of Riverine without changing his expression. He was tied up tightly with ropes, his face covered in blood. He shouted to the king, "No one, not even the king, has the right to stop a father from avenging his son." King Robb's voice was filled with suppressed anger. "Karstark, in the Battle of the Whispering Wood, Chapter 221, I saw your sons die with my own eyes. Torhen Karstark, Rickard's second son, and Eddard Karstark, Rickard's third son, did not die at the hands of Martin Lannister. How can this be called revenge?" His eyes became sharp. "This is a stupid act, a bloody murder. Your 2 sons died gloriously in battle, but you humiliated their honor by murdering innocent captives." Earl Rickard was not moved by King Robb's accusations. "My 2 sons are dead. They died at the hands of the king's lair. Blood debt can only be paid with blood, and this man is of the same clan as him, so his death is not a pity. Pay with the blood of children." Robb pointed angrily at the corpse below, and then said, "Rickard, how old is he?" "Only 12 or 13 years old." Earl Rickard did not back down. In response to the king's anger, he also chose to be angry. A descendant of the ancestors of the North, he can hunt and fight at the age of 10. He's not young anymore. Robb clenched his fists. He stared at the people below and said, "Rickard Karstark, Martin Lannister laid down his weapons in the Westerlands as early as possible. Chapter 262. From now on, they are just captives, disarmed and locked in cells. Damn it, this child is just a captive. Seeing the king's growing anger, Sir Brynden quietly approached, and just as he was about to speak, Robb raised his hand slightly to stop him. He continued, "You murdered the prisoners who lay down their arms. This is treason, treason." Lord Rickard raised his chin and said, "Killing the Lannisters is treason? Your Majesty, have you forgotten who our enemy is? We are still at war with the Lannisters, and war means death," he mocked. "Lord Ned must have taught you this. Has your Majesty forgotten your father's teachings, boy?" "Damn it!" The Greedjon swung his armored fist and knocked Lord Rickard to the ground. "Don't touch him." Robb's tone was stern, and he stopped the Greedjon who was about to continue. "Watch your mouth." After a warning, the Greedjon retreated. "Paw!" Lord Rickard spat out a tooth and said, "Very well, Greedjon, let the king deal with me." His bloody mouth split open and said, "Your Majesty, a father who loves his son will ask the king for anything. If you execute the regicide, I will let you deal with me. I managed to type a little bit in a drunken state. I will check for typos tomorrow. I can't hold on any longer. Well, and I wish you all a happy holiday, a sweet lantern festival, and a happy life." If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 284 Heavy Crown 3. As soon as Lord Rickard finished speaking, the hall fell silent. Robb stared at Lord Rickard below, his eyes becoming sharper. Greedjon suddenly snatched the spear from the guard, pressed it against Lord Rickard's back, and shouted angrily, "King Robb, let me poke open his chest and see what's inside." Lord Rickard laughed and said, "If my heart can wake my sons from the grave, I'm willing to dig it out." The blue veins on the back of his hands were throbbing, and Sir Brynden could clearly feel that his nephew's anger was getting stronger and stronger. He took a step forward and said to the people below, "Lord Karstark, many children from the Riverlands have died at the hands of the king's lair, and their fathers are also full of hatred." Lord Rickard's gaze shifted to Brynden Tully, and he grinned and said, "Lord Blackfish, everyone can stab a sword. I just want to avenge my son, and I don't mind anything else." Sir Brynden glanced at the people below and raised his voice slightly, "We are at war. For the sake of the Riverlands and the North, anyone may die on the battlefield. Dying in battle is the highest honor for a knight." He turned his head to look at King Robb, then turned his gaze back to the people below and said, "Your son died bravely in battle, but you, in the name of your father, used your selfishness to tarnish his honor." When Sir Blackfish finished speaking, the people below couldn't help but nod in agreement. Seeing this, Earl Rickard made a sound, spat blood, and said, "This is the business of the people of the North. Lord Blackfish, you are meddling too much." Buzz! Brynden stretched out his hand to suppress it, and the lords of the Riverlands who were about to speak did not speak. He said, "Lord Karstark, please take back your inappropriate words. You, I, and everyone present our vassals of King Robb." Edgemere Tully looked at his uncle with admiration. He took a step forward and said loudly, "Rickard Karstark, we all serve under the same banner of King Robb, but you killed my father's guards for your selfishness. If what you said is true, how should this account be settled?" Lord Rickard was speechless, but still said angrily, "The ancestors only believed in their swords and swords, not their ears and tongues." "You?" Edgemere pointed angrily at the stubborn rogue. Sir Brynden first raised his hand to stop Edgemere's action and said, "Lord Karstark, please answer me. When your sword pierced the Tully guards, did you ever think that we have been fighting side by side under King Robb's flag?" He slightly turned sideways, stretched out a hand towards where Robb was, and said, "Trouts can also speak with swords in their hands, but the wolf banner is flying over our heads. Edgemere and I have no right to deal with a king's vassal." Earl Rickard seemed to be roaring, "Come, take my head and let me see your craftsmanship." Sir Brynden's voice was hoarse and his eyes were deep. "If the king allows, I will." Black Valder had been standing behind, as if watching a show. He suddenly pushed away the people blocking in front of him rudely, walked out, and said loudly, "Lord Blackfish, my warhammer is happy to serve you and help you smash this northerner's head." Sir Brynden looked at Black Valder, who was eager to try. His eyes narrowed slightly, and said, "Little Frey, although I am a little old, I can still wield a sword like a young man." Hearing Sir Brynden's words of warning, he grinned, revealing his yellow teeth. but did not say anything. Then, he was pulled back into the crowd by the other Walders. Just as Robb was about to speak, Roose Bolton stroked his chest and said, "Your Majesty, please allow me." He moved and stood beside Earl Rickard, and continued, "Take Rickard Karstark to Winterfell and let Lord Eddard deal with him personally." Robb's eyes seemed to be burning with anger. Earl Rickard laughed and said, "If Lord Ned wants to cut off my head with ice, I have nothing to say and do not need any reason. That is the honor of the ancestors of the North." He looked around at the people present and said in a loud voice, "I, Rickard of the Karstark family, swear to the new and old gods that no matter who it is, no matter whose birth, as long as he can offer the head of the king's lair, I will marry my daughter, Alice Karstark, 15 years old this year, to him." Buzz! The hall suddenly became quiet, as if the air had frozen. Everyone present was stunned. Then, everyone began to whisper, and the steward shouted to stop them, "Silence! Silence! Silence!" King Robb's chest was heaving. He closed his eyes for a while and then opened them. He slowly stood up, glanced at everyone sharply, and said, "Gretchen, please continue to guard Rickard Karstark. Hang the other 7. Gretchen blinked and said, "King Robb, even the dead are being hanged." Robb looked coldly at Earl Rickard, who was still glaring at him, and said, "That's right, I don't want these dirty things to pollute the river of my uncle's house and let them feed the crows." As soon as he finished speaking, a prisoner knelt down and begged, "Your Majesty, I didn't kill anyone. I was just ordered to guard the door for them and see if anyone passed by." King Robb looked at the kneeling man and asked in a deep voice, "Do you know Rickard Karstark's intention? Did you see the weapons of the people who were traveling with you? Did you hear the screams and shouts of the young man?" The kneeling man answered honestly, "Yes, I know everything, but I didn't join. I was only ordered to guard the door. I swear, Great John, the man who is only responsible for guarding the door, should be hanged last so that he can watch others die." Under the majesty of the young wolf lord, everyone held their breath. He turned his head and said, Grandpa, Uncle, if it is convenient, please follow me." After saying this, he turned and left. The door was pushed open, and the Gretchen's men drove the captives out of the hall with spears. Boom! Thunder suddenly sounded at this time, as if the whole castle was shaking. Boom! Boom! The lightning became louder and louder. Earl Roose raised his light eyes, glanced at the sky that suddenly turned dark, and jumped onto the neighing horse. The reception room was dark, and its thick walls blocked the sound of thunder outside. A waiter came in with an oil lamp to light a fire, but was waved away by Robb, leaving only the lamp. When the door was closed, the room was dim and dull. Edgemure found a chair and sat down casually. Robb took off the crown on his head, put it on the table in front of him, and stared at it silently. Sir Brynden looked at Robb with a sullen face for a while, and said, "Your Majesty, Earl Bolton of the Dreadfort can no longer stay here. He has evil intentions." Before, Lord Roose's seemingly reasonable advice directly tore open the biggest problem hidden in the Trident and the Northern Kingdom. The Lords of the North are not only Robb's vassals, they are also Robb's father's vassals, and his father is resisting Greyjoy's invasion in Winterfell. Lord Roose is using Earl Rickard to force the young king. They can no longer suppress this matter. Robb still stared at the copper and black iron sword crown without saying a word. Sir Brynden sighed and said, "Black Valder. His actions just now also show the attitude of Lord Frey. We must be vigilant." The room was filled with a depressing atmosphere. Edgemure wanted to comfort his nephew, but he didn't know how to start. After a pause, Robb suddenly cursed in despair and anger, "Let the White Walkers capture the damn Rickard Karstark, Theon Greyjoy, Valder Frey, Tywin Lannister, everyone." Feeling the worry of his great-uncle and uncle, he exhaled slowly, and said, "When everyone was clamoring for the King of the North and I declared myself the King of the North, I told myself, I swore to myself, I must be a good king, not only value honor like my father, but also be strong, treat all vassals fairly, and bravely fight against the enemy." He sighed softly. "Until now, even I can't figure out why everything is so messed up. Who can tell me what's going on? Rickard and I fought side by side, through life and death, and his 2 sons died heroically in the Whispering Wood to protect me, and Martin Lannister is my enemy, but I have to deal with the father of my deceased friend for him." He looked at Sir Brynden. "Will the Lannisters thank me? Or, will the Freys thank me?" Sir Brynden shook his head bluntly. "No. Knock, knock." There was a knock on the door. After getting a response, Sir Reynold pushed the door open and entered, with rain dripping down his cloak and helmet. There was panic in his voice. "Your Majesty, all the Karstark soldiers have run away. Speak clearly. What do you mean by all ran away?" Robb's voice was turbid and unclear. Sir Ranald raised his hand and casually wiped the rain off his face, and replied, "They left in groups and very quickly. It is said that only the wounded are left in the Karstark camp." Robb's eyes were very sharp. "Have the Karstark soldiers regrouped?" Edgemure stood up suddenly and said, "Robb, I'll go to gather the army." "Edgemure, come back," Sir Brandon scolded. "You will provoke a battle between the Northern Army and the Riverland Army. Sit down." Edgemure opened his mouth, but still sat down obediently. Robb rubbed his temple and said, "Harrion, Earl Rickard's eldest son. They are going to join Harrion. The army led by Bolton is stationed in the north of the Twins, and the Karstark family shield soldiers led by Harrion. They are there." He rubbed his temple again, and continued, "More than 300 cavalry, 600 war horses. We lost the cavalry of the Karstarks." Edgemure reminded Robb, "The news must be blocked, otherwise." Sir Brandon interrupted, "The news has long been taken out by the Karstarks. We are already one step too late. I will announce the truth." Robb stared at the Dark Crown and continued, "Rickard Karstark provoked me and betrayed me. I have no choice but to sentence him to death." Chapter 285 The Heavy Crown, and hearing Robb's decision, Edgemure couldn't help but open his eyes wide. He opened his mouth and couldn't help saying, "Must he be killed? Can his life be spared?" Robb's sharp eyes moved to him, and he stammered, "Robb, Your Majesty, I hate him as much as you do. He killed my people. The guards of the cell were all my father's veterans, but they suffered this bad fate." His Adam's apple rolled, and he continued, "We must punish Earl Karstark, that's for sure. Maybe lock him up." Harrion, yes, Harrion Karstark. He seemed to have finally found a reasonable reason. "We can take Earl Karstark as a hostage and tell him that as long as he promises to be loyal to you, his father's life will be spared." He spread his hands. "The matter of Old Frey has not been resolved yet. If we lose the cavalry and infantry of the Karstark family again, what hope do we have in the war with the Lannister family?" The atmosphere in the room was dull. Edgemure swallowed secretly, and King Robb murmured, "Hope." After taking a deep breath, Robb went on, "Lord Frey still hasn't replied. The Vale has fallen into the hands of the Lannisters. Damn it! How could the Knights of the Vale, famous in the Seven Kingdoms, be defeated so quickly? They have tens of thousands of heavy cavalry. 10,000. No, 3,000 will be enough. If 3,000 of the Vale's heavy cavalry join us, I can change the situation of the war immediately." With a swish, Sir Brandon poured a glass of wine and placed it in front of Robb. He had always been kind to his nephew and grandson, but this time his tone was stern. "As a king, you cannot complain about the arrangement of the gods. This is a test of the gods for the new king." Robb was slightly stunned. He raised his glass and took a big sip of wine. After a pause, he said, "Sorry, I shouldn't do this." He exhaled and continued, "The Lannisters have just experienced a war. They cannot advance in a short time. I will take this opportunity to solve the problem at hand." His eyes swept over the two relatives in front of him, and said, "Uncle, Grandpa, Uncle, I plan to take this opportunity to reorganize the troops and prepare for the future decisive battle." Sir Brandon looked kind. He nodded and said, "I will support you, my king." Edgemure first looked at his uncle, then looked at Robb for a while, and said, "King Robb, perhaps we can end this war without fighting." Robb looked at Edgemure with a cold look. He hurriedly said, marriage. The Lannister servant proposed to me that I marry Cersei Lannister." After saying this, he remembered his uncle's advice and added, "The Karstark incident happened too suddenly, and I didn't have time to tell you about it." Robb stared at Edgemure, whose eyes were a little evasive, for a while, and said, "Uncle, please go on." Edgemure was secretly relieved, and he told him Tyrion's proposal in detail. After listening, Robb frowned and thought for a while. He looked at Sir Brandon. "Uncle, I don't trust the Lannisters. Could this be their conspiracy to rescue Tywin's eldest son?" Sir Brandon nodded slightly and said, "It is possible. We need to always be vigilant against the cunning of the Lannisters. If this is a conspiracy of the Lannisters, you can also use their conspiracy to buy us more time for reorganization." Thinking of the beauty of Cersei described by Tyrion, Edgemure's mind turned quickly. He suggested, "King Robb, we must first let Duke Tywin send Cersei Lannister to Riverrun before we can let his son go." Edgemure's face turned red when he was looked at by Sir Brandon. He pretended to be puzzled and said, "What's wrong? Is my idea bad?" Sir Brynden retracted his gaze and said nothing. Robb rarely smiled at Edmure and said, "Your idea is very good, Uncle." Edmure was flattered by Robb's praise. He couldn't help but chuckle. Sir Brynden barely managed to hold his hand to his forehead. Two things. Robb raised the crown made of steel and bronze with both hands, put it on his head, and said, "First, Rickard Karstark must die." Edmure was very surprised. He blurted out, "Wouldn't it be better not to kill him?" Robb moved the heavy crown and said, "Uncle, I have my own responsibilities. If there's a war, I will kill Martin Lannister with my own hands, but this is not a battlefield. He is unarmed and is my prisoner under my protection. Rickard Karstark not only murdered Martin Lannister, he also murdered my honor. Tomorrow morning, I will execute him." Sir Brynden was silent for a moment, nodded, and said, "What is the second thing?" Robb announced, "In 10 days, I will hold a wedding with Jean Westerling." Sir Brynden frowned slightly. "King Robb." Lord Frey's reply. King Robb shook his head and said, "Uncle, we don't have much time. We must let the Freys make a choice as soon as possible. Before the war comes, I must figure out who my enemy is. I would rather lead 10,000 loyal soldiers than choose 30,000 soldiers with ulterior motives." Metaphor, aren't you going to marry the Lannisters? Why are you talking about war again? Just when Edmure was confused, Robb said to him, "My uncle, I want to ask you for help in arranging the wedding." Edmure withdrew his thoughts and was very happy that his nephew trusted him. "Don't worry, leave it all to me, I will definitely arrange everything." The next morning, the storm that had lasted all night had passed, the sky was gray, and the cold was pressing. The 7 prisoners of Karstark had been hung on the high wall of Riverrun earlier, and the long ropes pulled the bodies to swing in the wind. The godswood at Riverrun was packed with people. Lords of the Riverlands and the north, nobles and servants, knights, sellswords, smiths, merchants, and matrons all stood in the woods to watch the execution. The Greatjans men led Lord Rickard, bound and tied, to the scaffold beneath the heart tree. King Robb snatched the executioner's long-handled axe, stood at the side of Earl Rickard, and said, "Rickard Karstark, I sentenced you to death. According to the tradition of the North, I will do it myself." Rickard was wearing a black wool coat with a sunburst emblem of the Karstark family embroidered on it. He raised his head stiffly and said, "For this, I thank you, but for the rest, I hate you." He looked directly at Robb. "Boy, remember, the blood of the running wolf flows not only in you, but also in me. I, Rickard, named this in memory of your grandfather. I fought for your father and King Aerys, the Mad King, and fought for you against King Joffrey. In the Westerlands, in the Riverlands, I fought shoulder to shoulder with you. On the banks of the Trident, I helped your father fight to the end. Stark and Karstark, we are relatives with flesh and blood." 1,000 years ago, Caron Stark, the youngest son of Winterfell, led his army to quell the rebellion and was granted fiefdom for his bravery in battle. He named his castle Caron, and over time, it became Carher, and the Stark family of Carher was also called the Karstark family. King Robb said coldly, "You are my relative, but you still betrayed me. Blood cannot save you. Kneel down, Rickard Karstark." Rickard's mouth cracked. "The new and old gods will curse the kinslayer forever." King Robb repeated coldly, "Do you want me to ask someone to put you on the scaffold? Kneel down, traitor." Lord Rickard knelt down, put his head on the scaffold and said, "You judge me, and the gods will judge you, Rickard Karstark, Lord of Carher, in the presence of the gods and the world. I, Robb Stark, in the name of the King of the North and the Trident, sentence you to death for murder and treason, and execute you personally." King Robb said to Lord Rickard in accordance with the tradition of the ancestors, "Do you have anything to say?" Lord Rickard's voice was filled with hatred. "Kill me quickly and accept the curse. You are no longer my king, boy." The axe rose and fell, heavy and precise, blood splattered, and Lord Rickard's head was separated from his body. Pa, pa, the heavy rain came suddenly. In the distance, Tyrion wiped the rain off his face and said, "A very fair young man, but such a person is not suitable to join the Game of Thrones." The rain was getting heavier, and Bronn didn't hear clearly. "My lord, what did you say?" Tyrion's short legs quickened his pace and said casually, "I mean Lord Tywin will love this young man to death." His vision became blurred because of the heavy rain. Although he still couldn't hear clearly, Bronn didn't ask any more questions, and he also quickened his pace slightly. In the inn, Tyrion threw the towel to the little servant. He held the wineglass, came to the window, and took a sip of wine. Bronn combed his hair with his fingers, leaned against the window, and said, "My lord, You don't seem to be in a good mood. Tyrion looked at the heavy rain outside the window, took a sip of wine, and said, a bad world needs just people, but truly just people often can't win the Game of Thrones. Bronn scratched his cheek with his index finger and said, my lord, in order to get your reward, I really want to flatter you, but to be honest, the mercenary in front of you didn't quite understand what you said. He pinched his chin and continued, you seem to feel sorry for that King Stark. After a pause, he said, or, do you think there is something wrong with his handling? Tyrion turned his head to look at Bronn and said, mercenary. Has anyone told you that you are a little too smart? Bronn shrugged and said, as a mercenary, I cannot understand what my employer says, but I must understand his preferences. This is related to how much reward I can get. Tyrion tilted his head and said, what a disturbing answer. Bronn stared at the purse hanging on Tyrion's waist and grinned, my noble lord, I will always be yours. The Lannister lion took off the purse and threw it away, saying, Lisa again. Bronn bowed and said, it's Lisa. He showed a lewd smile, she can make me feel the value of gold dragons. He bowed again gracefully, thank you for your reward. Her craftsmanship is great. Tyrion pinched his chin and said suspiciously, it seems that she likes gold dragons very much. Why don't I know? Bronn's smile became even more lewd, maybe, she knows you can give her more. Tyrion immediately laughed, I have to warn you not to ask her about my size. Bronn, he grinned, I'm worried that you will be frustrated from now on. While they were still joking, Robb's captain of the guard, Reynold Westerling, came in the rain. He said, messenger of Lannister, the king of the north and the Trident will summon you to the main castle hall tomorrow morning. Tyrion looked at the heir to the Earl of the Westerlands and the Rock, and said with a smile, I am deeply honored. Please thank King Stark for me. Sir Reynold lowered his chin and turned around to walk away. When he was about to reach the door, Tyrion suddenly called him. Sir Reynold turned around and looked at him. Tyrion said with doubt in his voice, Sir, did the Westerling family decide to move their family to the snowy Winterfell because the Westerling is too hot? Sir Reynold blushed and said, in 9 days, my sister will have a grand wedding with King Robb. Westerling is the Queen's family, Lannister. With a cold snort, he pushed the door and left. Tyrion looked at Bronn standing aside, spread his hands and said, it's so easy to find out a secret here. Bronn grinned, soon it won't be a secret, my lord. After a pause, Tyrion sighed, my kind father is so lucky. The old man of the 7 gods is too partial. He leaned back in his chair, took a sip of wine, and said, I'm actually very curious, why didn't King Stark let his relatives wear black clothes? Is the old man of the 7 gods really protecting the old lion? Don't think about it, maybe I will know the answer after meeting King Stark. Tyrion walked towards a room with his hands behind his back. Chapter 286 The Well-Behaved Lioness. 3 days later, in the small hall of the Red Keep, Tower of Mag, Cersei Lannister, who was a little tipsy, leaned against the armrest of the chair. She was wearing a wine-red off-shoulder dress, and her figure was seductive. Her green eyes moved slightly, looking at Osney Kettleblack. Chapter 256, one of Cersei's guards, who pushed the door open. Her cheeks were like the sunset glow of summer, and she raised the corners of her lips slightly, saying, Osney, you are here, come here. Queen Cersei looked particularly beautiful in the afterglow of the evening. Hearing her voice, Osney paused slightly, and the ears of the 19-year-old young man could not help but turn red. Osney was tall, with black hair and a hooked nose, and his beard was shaved clean. At this moment, his face was a little shy. When he stood still and was about to report the intelligence he had just learned, Queen Cersei called softly, come here, get closer. Looking up at Queen Cersei who was staring at him, Osney raised his foot and took a step forward and stood still again. Queen Cersei frowned slightly and said, come closer to me, Sir Kettleblack. After the Battle of the Blackwater, although Osney and Osfried, the captain of Cersei's guard, of the Kettleblack brothers did not participate in the actual battle, they were both knighted at the instruction of Queen Cersei. Osney moved his feet, and Queen Cersei said impatiently, come closer to me and kneel before me. Osney knelt down almost against Cersei's skirt, and his eyes could not help but sweep over her lower abdomen. After a pause, he quickly lowered his face respectfully. His ears became redder, and his voice trembled a little. Your Majesty, I have something important to tell you. Cersei's white and tender fingers slowly stroked Osney's face and hair, and he suddenly forgot what he was going to say. After a while, she stretched out a finger, slightly lifted Osney's chin, and said, I heard that among the Kettleblack brothers. She raised the corner of her mouth, You are the most popular, Osney replied blankly. Maybe, because Osforley, Osney's second brother, he is Cersei's guard captain, has a stern face all day long. The finger moved down, and the fingertips slowly drew circles on Osney's chest. Queen Cersei smiled and said, "You are really cute." Queen Cersei's voice was extremely seductive. Osney's body trembled slightly. A certain desire flashed in his eyes. He mustered up the courage, and looked up at the most noble woman in the Seven Kingdoms. At this time, Queen Cersei leaned back gently on the chair and said coldly, "Stand back, sir, don't get too close to me." Osney was stunned, and his mood suddenly became very depressed, as if he had lost something very important. He stood up obediently and took a few steps back. After standing up, he was still thinking hard about what mistake he had just made that made Queen Cersei's attitude towards him suddenly change. Queen Cersei shook the jeweled wine glass in her hand. She looked at Osney, who was in silence, and her mouth curved slightly. A man can only think with a soft worm between his legs. As long as I control it, he will be at my disposal. Sir Osney, Cersei's voice came. It turned out that her voice was so beautiful. Osney couldn't help but smile flatteringly and happily. Osney hurriedly looked at Queen Cersei. In his sight, her hand gently stroked her curvy collarbone. Osney's Adam's apple rolled up and down unconsciously. Queen Cersei's voice sounded, "What do you want to report to me, sire?" "Yes, I have something important to tell you." Osney swallowed secretly, calmed his heart, and said, "Your Majesty, I got the news. There are no secrets in the Red Castle for those who are interested." Osney told Queen Cersei. Tyrion proposed to Lord Tywin to marry her to Edmure Tully, the heir of Riverrun. Clang, the exquisite golden wine glass was thrown on the stone slab by Queen Cersei. She suppressed her anger and said, "What did my father say?" "Sorry, Your Majesty, I haven't found out what Lord Tywin thinks about this matter." Osney had a worried look in his eyes. Cersei walked back and forth, saying, "You treat me as an object again? How dare you? How dare you?" She suddenly stopped and said angrily, "I want to see the old lion." With a clang, the door of the study in the Prime Minister's tower was pushed open, and Queen Cersei walked in with her chin held high. Tywin Lannister, who was writing a letter, glanced at Cersei, who had barged in calmly, and the quill in his hand did not stop. The old lion just glanced at her lightly, but the originally aggressive lioness suddenly became a well-behaved little she-cat. She forced a smile, bowed gently, and said, "Good night, Father." She grabbed the back of the chair on the other side of the table with one hand, as if she was making small talk. "You haven't rested yet. Do you have a lot of government affairs? Are you hungry? Do you want someone to prepare something to eat, or have something?" Lord Tywin's quill pen was still moving, and he didn't even raise his head. He said, "Please sit down, thank you." Cersei sat down gently. Her manners were more elegant than the Tully family's ladies. Cersei straightened her back and waited quietly. Swish, swish, there was only the sound of the pen tip writing on the paper. After a pause, she couldn't help but cough lightly, hinting to Lord Tywin she had something to say. Swish, swish, Lord Tywin seemed not to hear the movement of his well-behaved daughter, and he still didn't raise his head. After a while, Cersei coughed again, and the sound this time was slightly louder than the last time. The quill in Lord Tywin's hand paused for a moment, then continued writing, saying, "Please speak." Cersei pursed her lips and smiled. She looked at the old lion and said, "Father, I think, among your children, I am your most outstanding descendant." She raised her chin slightly. "I can make a greater contribution to the Lannister family in the Red Castle." Lord Tywin had just finished writing and put down his pen. He leaned back in his chair and looked at his daughter in front of him with his light green eyes dotted with gold. Facing the old lion's gaze, Cersei flexed her fingers under the table and smiled like a lady. In Cersei's expectant eyes, Lord Tywin spread his hands and said, "Yes, please contribute." Cersei, after a long silence, Lord Tywin's good patience made Cersei even more nervous. In desperation, she thought of a good suggestion. "Father, in view of our last battle with Stannis, the kingdom should strengthen the royal fleet in Blackwater Bay as soon as possible, especially warships with 200 oars. The more the better." "Very good." Lord Tywin nodded in agreement and said, "Then please tell me, where are the golden dragons for shipbuilding?" Cersei was slightly stunned, blinked her beautiful eyes, and said strangely, "Of course. Find the Chancellor of Finance." Lord Tywin stared at Cersei for a while and said, "Then where does he find the money?" The kingdom's treasury where even mice don't want to stay. I know the situation of the kingdom's treasury, Cersei reminded Lord Tywin. Although not rich, doesn't Robert still have a powerful royal fleet? Moreover, he can still spend his days in debauchery. There was a hint of anger in Lord Tywin's voice. Have you ever thought that Robert is not short of money because of my continued funding? Cersei, after a pause, she tentatively said, Father, are you going to stop funding Joffrey? This, Lord Tywin tightened his grip on the armrest and interrupted loudly, How can I stop? How can I stop? I can only continue. He took a breath slowly and continued, but war is like a bottomless pit that swallows gold. Only by ending the war as soon as possible can we keep the Lannisters and your son's Iron Throne. He stared at Cersei and said, This is the greatest contribution you can make. Cersei's eyes flushed. So, is it true that you want to exchange me for peace? I want to stay in King's Landing, stay with my son, and I won't marry. Lord Tywin clenched his upper and lower teeth and said, Cersei, I will choose a suitable candidate for you. You can still give birth. You will have a new husband and give birth to children for him. Chapter 287 Generous Allies. Cersei clenched her slender fingers into fists, her voice firm. No, I won't marry. Lord Tywin spoke word by word. You have to marry, Cersei said angrily. I'm the Queen Regent. I'm not a stud. Lord Tywin suddenly shouted, You are my daughter. His voice was trembling with suppressed anger. You have to listen to my orders. You have to marry the man I designate. His eyes were cold. I never want to hear vicious rumors about you again. The old lion's roar made Cersei's body tremble, and her green eyes were moist. Father, don't force me to marry anymore, please. Cersei's plea was interrupted coldly by Lord Tywin. No need to say more. After staring at Cersei for a while with tears overflowing from the corners of her eyes, he gritted his teeth and said, My daughter, you have humiliated the Lannisters for too long. Cersei wiped the tears from her cheeks with the back of her hand, her eyes flashing. No, the Lannister lioness will never admit defeat, and will never be manipulated by others. Even the old lion can't force me. She rolled her moist and clear eyes, and kept thinking of a good way. Lord Tywin seemed to see through Cersei's thoughts at a glance. He said, Cersei, I don't like you, not because you are a woman, but because you are smart and self-righteous. He stared at his arrogant daughter with an unconvinced face. As a Lannister, as a mother, you actually let your son sit on the Iron Throne and make trouble. You are not qualified to be the mother of the king. Don't cause trouble for Lannister again. His voice was full of warnings. Do you think you will be the first woman to be dragged into the September to get married? Cersei's fullness rose and fell slightly. She stopped talking, stood up from the chair, and turned to leave with her skirt flying. When she left, although Cersei still held her chin high, she could not hide her embarrassment at the moment. Outside the door of the room, Cersei's cold snort came, and soon, Kevan Lannister walked in. Glancing at Lord Tywin who was sitting upright, Sir Kevan asked, Lord Tywin, have you made up your mind? Lord Tywin tapped the armrest of the Prime Minister's chair with his index finger, shook his head slightly, and said, Tyrell, Tully, I haven't made a choice yet. I heard that Lord Mace will arrive in King's Landing in 3 or 4 days. He is very likely to come for another marriage agreed upon by the Lannisters and the Tyrells. Chapter 269. As he spoke, Sir Kevan suddenly paused. A sharp look flashed across his respectful face, and he said, Lord Tywin, why did Cersei come to you? I see she is very unhappy. I thought she was talking about a marriage, Lord Tywin said coldly. She heard the news. The Red Castle without secrets as a joke. He looked at Sir Kevan. I'll give you a task. Interrogate everyone in the Prime Minister's tower. In my name, execute them directly and let everyone know the consequences of leaking information. Yes, Lord Tywin. After a pause, Sir Kevan said, Cersei is Joffrey's mother after all. If necessary, I can talk to her, Lord Tywin said coldly. Kevan, as a Lannister, Cersei's responsibility and obligation to marry for the sake of the family is her responsibility and obligation. No need to say more, he snorted coldly, and said, if you go to her, my clever daughter will think she still has room for negotiation. Sir Kevan shrugged and stopped talking. Lord Tywin pointed to the chair opposite him and said, let's talk about Lord Frey. Is he still hesitant? After sitting down, Sir Kevan shook his head and said respectfully, perhaps he still has some hope for the little wolf. Lord Frey has not replied to my last letter. Lord Tywin frowned and thought for a while, then said, if Cersei's marriage partner is changed to the Tully family, The cost of appeasing the Tyrell family will be very high. Lord Mace set off early for my daughter. Sir Kevin nodded and said, except for Cersei, there is no marriageable woman in the Lannister family who is worthy of the status of heir to Highgarden. After hesitating for a while, he said, Lord Tywin, I am more worried about Earl Crab who conquered the Vale. Whether it is true or not, his loyalty to Cersei is known to all the Seven Kingdoms. I am worried that she will do things that harm the interests of the family in order to get rid of the family's arrangement. With the help of Earl Crab, it can at least destroy our plan. So, perhaps we should appease Crab in advance to avoid accidents. Lord Tywin was silent for a while, then said, Go on, let me hear your thoughts. Sir Kevin nodded slightly, and said respectfully, Lord Crab's military talent is obvious to all. If the Frey family cannot be used by us, perhaps he will be a good opponent for the little wolf. His eyes narrowed slightly. For this goal, it is worthwhile for us to sacrifice Princess Myrcella. Perhaps, this step can make Lord Crab a real one of ours. Lord Tywin crossed his fingers, rested his chin on his hand, pondered for a moment, and said, It's not enough. Myrcella is only in her early 10 years old. She does not have the charm that exceeds her own value. Sir Kevin tentatively said, Lord Tywin, are you worried about Cersei? Lord Tywin looked at Sir Kevin and said, Kevin, for Crab, it is more beneficial for him to have the Queen Regent in Meater than a young princess who is not even fertile. After a pause, Sir Kevin nodded slowly and said, as Myrcella's mother, Cersei can have sufficient reasons to reject our proposal. For example, the huge difference in bloodline between Baratheon and Crab. This reason alone is enough. He spread his hands. Even if he conquers the Vale and becomes a famous general throughout the Seven Kingdoms, in the eyes of others he is at most an upstart. The ancient nobles will still regard Crab as a half-wild noble from the swamps of Crab Claw Peninsula. After a pause, Sir Kevin looked at Lord Tywin. Perhaps, the young lord cares more about this kind of thing than we thought, just like Lord Frey of the twins, and Myrcella's identity can just help Lord Crab make up for this. This value is very attractive, enough for him to give up Cersei. Lord Tywin leaned back in his chair. He stared at Sir Kevin for a while and warned, don't base another person's real needs on what you see, what you think, and seemingly reasonable speculations. Kevin, his tone was instructive, the closer he is to you, the more vigilant you should be, because he may be an enemy hiding beside you, and when he betrays you, it is often a fatal blow. After listening carefully, Sir Kevin said solemnly, I will keep it in mind, brother. Lord Tywin tapped his chin lightly, paused, and said, Cersei can't stay in Mead Tower any longer. Sir Kevin said, Lord Tywin, have you made a decision? Lord Tywin stood up and walked to the wall where the map of the Seven Kingdoms was hung. He stared at it for a while and said, marry the Tullys and let the little wolf continue to wear that ridiculous crown, and we can immediately quell this chaos. He murmured. As for the Tyrell family, after a moment of silence, he continued, the Tyrell family is our only strong rival in terms of resources, and we must continue to win them over. When the Duke of Mace arrives in King's Landing, we must propose before he speaks, that my heir should marry a woman from the Tyrell family. Sir Kevin nodded and said, do you want to modify the content of the alliance agreement? Chapter 235. Lord Tywin stared at the map, shook his head, and said, it is to add another marriage. We sincerely consolidate the alliance between Lannister and Tyrell. He turned his head to look at Sir Kevin standing beside him and said, Kevin, Lannister has always been generous to allies. We also need to choose another suitable marriage partner for the heir of Highgarden. Sir Kevin smiled and said, Duke Mace is very greedy. He pointed to Storm's End on the map and said, I heard that when he was advocating his art of war in King's Landing, he often said that this was his regret. As a generous ally, we should give him a chance to make up for his regrets. When the two of them were discussing the specific plan, there was a knock on the door. After receiving the response, a Lannister red robe brought a letter brought by a raven. Sir Kevin glanced at Lord Tywin and opened the letter. The seal of the Frey family with a bridge connecting the twin towers appeared in his sight. At night, the Queen Mother's bedroom in Mead Tower. The candlelight flickered, and Queen Cersei sat at the table, waving the quill in her hand fiercely. Grim Crab, I command you, immediately. The quill in her hand suddenly paused, and Queen Cersei sat motionless for a while, then picked up the paper in front of her and tore it up angrily. The pieces of paper were scattered all over the floor, and she picked up the wine glass on the table and drank it all. After a pause, she took out a new paper and picked up the quill again. Dear, I have always wanted to call you this, my Grim. 4 days later, the Airy. Dear Grim, I can only call you secretly. I want to look into your eyes and call you softly, my dear. Dear, I miss your embrace so much. Dear, I can't imagine being separated from you for a long time. Dear, at least let me have your shadow in my eyes. Dear. Dear. Lord Grim put down the letter and rubbed his head. He needed Jaime Lannister. Chapter 288 Green and the Lioness. Cersei writes a letter with a happy and sweet face? Green picked up Cersei's letter again. He knew her. He could even imagine Cersei's boss writing a letter with gritted teeth. Lord Green was weighing the pros and cons while stroking the letter with his fingertips. The next step is the Riverlands, so it is more in Crab's interest for Queen Cersei to remain in the Tower of Mag. Although Green looked at the letter on the surface, his thoughts were racing. After Stannis was defeated, neither Lannister nor Tyrell wanted Cersei to stay in the Tower of Mag. Green's brown eyes trembled slightly. Perhaps Joffrey also hoped so. According to the information sent by Leighton in the Red Castle, the king was increasingly disgusted with the nagging from the Queen Mother. Green threw Queen Cersei's confession letter into the brazier. Whoosh, the flames rose, and he stared at it burning out. Now, Queen Cersei's situation feels like she is being abandoned by everyone. She has to lower her chin, which has always been high, and Jaime, whom she trusts the most, is still a prisoner. She can only ask him for help. Jaime. Green took out a map and spread it on the table. He stared at the intersection of the River Road and the King's Road. His sight slowly moved along the River Road to the location of Riverrun. Without the support of intelligence, Lord Green could not know the specific situation of Tyrion and Riverrun. He could only guess that the negotiations there could not be concluded in a short time. Green's eyes were slightly fixed. Queen Cersei mentioned Highgarden and Riverrun in the letter expressing her love. She wrote in the letter, Highgarden and Riverrun want to stop me from whispering in your ear. Green couldn't help scratching his head. Queen Cersei could easily grasp the key points of men, but she could never grasp the key points of things. This was very Cersei. Therefore, Lord Tywin intended to use Queen Cersei to marry Riverrun. This was probably Tyrion's idea. If the Lannisters and Tullys were successfully married, this would not be in line with Crab's strategy. What he needed was the chaotic Riverlands. Green missed Varys and Petyr a little bit. If they were still there, forget it, it's better not to mention it. The essence of hiding behind the scenes is to pick up leaks. He needs to adapt to his new identity. Green has already sat on a chair at the table of the Game of Thrones, and he should personally seize his own interests. Although he has not experienced the pleasure on the bed, Green and Cersei have established a deep trust, and more importantly, she is very generous, which is exactly what Lord Green values most. If he returns to the Red Keep, at this time, Queen Mother Cersei will be eager to use her best method to consolidate Green's loyalty. Now is not the past. Even if Lord Green is on Cersei's ship, the cost of getting off the ship will not be high. He controls the Vale and Crab Claw Peninsula, and he has the strength to choose allies. Although Cersei is willful, he has to admit that she is charming. As a man, it is difficult to refuse Cersei's beauty and charm, including Green, who has always been able to stick to it. In fact, he should thank Jaime and Lancel. Because the two of them are more likely to make Lord Green remember the knowledge before the time travel, and they are like-minded. Because they are familiar with each other, many times Lord Green's fire can be extinguished instantly. Another important point is that Lord Green, who pays attention to details, later discovered that Cersei looked down on all the men who had had sex with her, including Jaime Lannister, who loved her deeply. What cannot be obtained is the best and most expensive. Lord Green must continue to control the fairness in the transaction with Queen Mother Cersei. The attractive body cannot replace the value of land. Among them, if Jaime is there, it will be even more difficult for Green to concentrate on the outside world. Therefore, Lord Green also set his sights on Sir Jaime, who was a prisoner in Riverrun. Green pulled out a blank piece of parchment and dipped the quill pen in ink. With the quill pen waving, he was writing a new order. Mason Baker, a retainer knight of Crab, was appointed as the commander-in-chief of the army to Maidenpool, and Dick Crab was appointed as the adjutant. If peace is to be achieved, the condition is that Earl William Wooten of Maidenpool will swear allegiance to Crab with the entire Wooten family and marry his eldest daughter and heir, Alano Wooten, to Dick Crab. After sealing the letter with wax, Green handed it to Brienne and said, "Send it to the Crow's Nest and let Mr. Elrin arrange it immediately." After Brienne took the letter, He added an instruction: Brittany, tell Elrond that if you receive a letter from Leighton, bring it back immediately no matter what time it is. The cautious Lord Green believed that if his guess was correct, Leighton in the Red Keep would soon bring news that Duke Tywin wanted to negotiate a marriage with Reverin. Not long after Brienne left, Lord Greven came to the study and said, Lord Green, your fiancé's team will rest at the inn in the town to the east tonight and arrive at the Gates of the Moon tomorrow morning. Green stopped writing with a quill in his hand, raised his head and said, Is the welcome ceremony ready? Baron Greven showed a confident look. He touched his chest and said, Tomorrow morning, thousands of people will gather at the Gates of the Moon to welcome the future mistress of the Vale. Green smiled and said, Thank you, loyal Greven. He turned to Baron Greven, who was looking happy, and said, Tonight, we will all rest at the Gates of the Moon. You arrange for people to prepare. Green will personally welcome Daenerys at the Gates of the Moon to show his respect for his fiancée. Go and arrange it. Greven waved the quill and continued to write. The recipient was Cersei Lannister. Cersei was the Queen Regent. As long as he got her permission, Green's actions in the Seven Kingdoms would be legal. He told her that her loyal knights would go through the Bleeding Gate and south to the Riverlands in the name of conquering the rebels and the Earl of Maidenpool. In order to prevent the desperate Queen Mother Cersei from suddenly destroying the Red Keep with a boom, Green mentioned a time limit in the letter, and her guardian knights would enter King's Landing within a month. Near dusk, Green and others took the basket that he specially arranged to modify and descended from the Eyrie to the Gates of the Moon. The next morning, more than 1,000 people gathered on both sides of the road outside the east gate of the Gates of the Moon. The women wore their most beautiful clothes, and most of the men had their children sitting on their shoulders. Flowers and ribbons made it look like a festival. Green led the vassals to stand in the front. His cloak embroidered with swamp marigolds swaying slightly in the wind, and one of his hands gently grasped the ruby hilt of the Lady of Emptiness at his waist. In the atmosphere of excitement and expectation, bursts of horse hooves came from afar, and a gorgeous carriage gradually came into sight, followed by dozens of cavalrymen holding high the flag of swamp marigolds. The carriage was decorated with exquisite patterns, and the windows were hung with tulle. As he looked closer and closer, he could see the figure inside, and Green couldn't help but bend the corners of his lips slightly. Chapter 289 Green and the True Dragon. Through the curtain, the sharp Green felt a strong gaze from inside the carriage, and the corners of his mouth rose even more. As her loyal guard, Brienne was secretly alert to the situation around her. She glanced at Green, who had been smiling almost since morning. As the carriage approached, her tall body straightened and her chin raised. Amid cheers, the carriage stopped, and a waiter lifted the footrest under the carriage door. The carriage door was opened, and Daenerys appeared in front of everyone. She was wearing a blue off-shoulder dress and a crystal white pearl necklace. Her skin was as white as ivory, and it seemed to be shining in the sun. Daenerys's face wrapped in a headscarf was delicate and beautiful. Standing on the footrest, her pair of violet eyes looked around, and her smile was as warm as the summer sun. At that moment, the crowd seemed to stop for a moment, and then burst into even louder cheers. Green approached and stretched out a hand to Daenerys. After looking at each other, Daenerys lifted the hem of her long dress with one hand, held Green's hand with the other hand, and walked down the carriage gracefully. Then, the vassals of the Vale came forward one by one to greet her, and Daenerys returned the greeting with a gentle and dignified smile. After the greetings with the vassals, Daenerys met with the elderly, children and merchants from various industries selected in advance by Baron Griffin to show the fairness of the new ruling family. Near noon, the welcome ceremony was coming to an end. Daenerys used her beauty and gentleness to soothe the fear that the Bloody Earl brought to the people of the Vale. At this moment, the atmosphere outside the Gates of the Moon was full of happiness and hope. Before entering the castle, Daenerys turned around and waved, and then, her and Green's figures gradually disappeared, and behind her and him was the sound of the crowd that rose again like a frenzy, deafening. In the long corridor, Green and Daenerys were surrounded by stewards Urana, Montan, Brienne, Ange and others, walking and talking softly. Green was talking about the government affairs of the valley seriously. After the harvest season, the old farmers in the direct territory will come to express their gratitude on behalf of their villages for the tax exemption of crab. We can take this opportunity to reiterate Crab's decree to stabilize grain prices. Chapter 273. While speaking, one of Green's fingers seemed to slide across the back of Daenerys's hand inadvertently. Daenerys looked at Green, she pursed her lips and smiled, and her tone at this time was very similar to his. Green, I have discussed with Mr. Al that after the harvest season, we can also hire them to help us build a nearby granary." Daenerys' eyes gently passed over Green, and Lord Green's eyebrows suddenly raised slightly. Was she provoking him? Green's eyes were full of fighting spirit. Daenerys' beautiful eyes curved into crescents. Her smile was meaningful. She took the initiative to hold Green's arm, and let him feel her tenderness. Thinking that no one could notice the small action, he did not avoid Green and the three top warriors behind Daenerys. Montan chuckled quietly, Anguy was laughing secretly, and Brienne glanced at the two men who were not steady enough with an expressionless face. After arriving at the study, Lord Green asked the others to leave in the name of discussing government affairs. Not long after the door was closed, Daenerys' head just reached Green's shoulder. She raised her head and was about to speak, but her body was suddenly hugged by him around the waist. She couldn't help but scream in a low voice. Sitting on the table, Daenerys hugged Green's neck tightly, and kept it warm for a long time. She grabbed one of his hands with trembling hands. Daenerys' cheeks were flushed. "Green, wait, let me take a shower first." With a short breath, she seemed to explain, "Just now, I sweated a lot." Green lowered his head, and this time the warmth became light and gentle. When the breathing of the two calmed down a little, they separated. Daenerys straightened her skirt and suddenly said, "Green, go and see Regan and the others," she complained. "Without the fatherly love you mentioned, they actually look down on their mother." Chapter 249. Green leaned on the edge of the table, smiled, and said, "As you say, Princess." Daenerys couldn't help but chuckle. When she opened the door and left, she rarely glanced at Green. Lord Green smiled. Was she deliberately adding fuel to the fire, to make his fatherly love more intense? It seemed that the three little dragons had offended Dany. Green took a step forward. It was time for the three little dragons to experience the fatherly love as heavy as the Moon Mountains. He behaved well, and she behaved well to him. This was reasonable and fair. Cough. More than half an hour later, the knife sharpener Green walked out of the temporary room of the three little dragons. Regan, Viserion, and Jones, the three brothers, huddled in a corner lovingly, and saw off their kind father. The door closed, and after a pause, Regal pushed open Viserion and Jones, who were leaning against it, with a look of disdain in his fiery eyes. More than half an hour later, when Grimm, who had just finished his bath, appeared in the bedroom, he learned from the maid that Daenerys was still in the bathroom. Lying on the bed, when Grimm was about to fall asleep, he finally waited for Daenerys. He took off his headscarf, and her silver hair had grown to almost reach her ears. He said fiercely, "Dany, I didn't beg for mercy this time. Grimm, let me rest for a while, please. Grimm, please. Grimm, I'm done." The sun went down. Grimm's face was a little pale, while Daenerys was radiant, and she took his arm to attend the grand dinner held for her. The gates of the moon was filled with laughter and joy, and the unusually lively banquet lasted until late at night. Back in the Lord's bedroom, Grimm and Daenerys looked at each other for a while, and then, the candlelight flickered. "Green, please," Lord Green snorted mercilessly. "Green, Suranna, and I have heard of another method." Daenerys struggled to get up. She had to try the unfamiliar new knowledge. Feeling that the effect was good, she raised her purple eyes and looked at him. "Green, lie down." The next morning, Green had just finished a music lesson for the three little dragons, and then he met with Montan and Ange in the study. After listening to their experiences in Essos, Green looked at Montan and Ange and said, "Thank you for your hard work. This contribution is no less than the achievements of others in the valley." His eyes moved slightly, and he looked at the fat Montan. "According to your merits, I can eliminate your illegitimate status for you. Requires a king's order." "Montan, do you know who your biological father is?" Montan shook his big head and said naively, "My mother only knows that he is a hunter. She said he called himself the Fierce Lao Tang. My mother said that the soup he cooked was very fragrant." Green asked, "Where does your mother live?" Montan smiled and said, "She is a clerk in U Village, a large farm in the west of Crab Claw Peninsula. She can read." Chapter 46. Very good. Green nodded his chin lightly, and he turned to look at Ange. "You can think of your last name in advance. According to your merits, I will personally enthrone you as knights in the cathedral in King's Landing." The generous Lord Green said in a gentle voice, "Go and claim the golden dragon that belongs to you." After Montan and Anguy left, Brienne informed Green that Daenerys' guard, Arstan the Whitebird, Barristan Selmy, requested an audience. Green tapped the armrest with his fingers and said, "Please ask him to come in." Sir Barristan turned back into the spirited old knight he used to be. After entering the study, he took the initiative to salute on his chest. "Good day, Earl Green." Green returned the salute. He glanced at Sir Barristan's sword and said, "Congratulations, you have found the knight's sword, old sir." Sir Barristan smiled and said, "Thank you, Princess, and thank you." Chapter 275. Green pointed to the chair in front of his desk and said, "Please sit down, Sir Barristan." He said again, "Brittany, please pour us a glass of summer red." After Sir Barristan sat down, Green smiled and said, "Respected old sir, what can I do for you?" There was a sound of Brienne pouring wine. Sir Barristan hesitated and said, "Earl Green, I request to speak to you alone." Brienne placed a glass gently on the table in front of them, and Sir Barristan nodded to apologize for his request. Brienne looked at Green, who shook his head slightly and said, "Sir Barristan, Brienne of Tarth is my personal guard." He picked up the wine glass and shook it lightly, and continued, "I trust her, and I will have no secrets in front of her. As my personal guard, she must know everyone who can get close to me. Only in this way can she tell who is my enemy." Taking a sip of summer red, Green continued, "She also has to judge who will be a potential enemy that threatens my safety, Sir Barristan." Chapter 290. Green and the True Dragon. And after saying that, Green leaned back in his chair and just looked at Sir Barristan quietly. Hearing Green's reminder, Barristan Selmy nodded and apologized. "I am presumptuous," he added. "As you said, I think Lady Brienne has also known the true identity of Her Royal Highness the Princess." After a pause, the old knight said directly, "I heard." After hesitating, he changed his words and said, "Her Royal Highness the Princess told me that you promised that you would reveal her identity within a year and hold a wedding with her." Green lowered his eyes slightly, his fingers tapping on the armrest. Seeing that Sir Barristan was looking at him silently, he raised one hand slightly and made a gesture of invitation. The old knight's eyes were deep. "Excuse me for being frank, but your decision is impulsive, and it will put Her Royal Highness the Princess in danger, Earl Green." After saying that, he may have realized that his words were too direct, and he added, "Perhaps we should not underestimate the strength of the usurper. If a common enemy appears, they will still choose to unite." Because this is related to the survival of the family, there was silence in the study for a moment, and Green Crab made a gesture of invitation again. Sir Barristan stared at Green, whose face was calm, for a while. He exhaled and said, "I'm done, Earl Green." Green nodded and said, "Old sir, I want to ask, who do you belong to?" Sir Barristan frowned slightly and said, "I will always be loyal to Her Royal Highness the Princess until my death." "Yes, your current identity is the Princess's loyal guard." Green said again, "Old sir, I want to ask, where is this place? Also, what is the relationship between me and the Princess?" "Please answer these two questions seriously." Sir Barristan frowned and thought. After a pause, he still answered the question that sounded very simple. "This is the Gates of the Moon, and she is your fiancée." After hesitating, the old knight who embarked on the road of atonement added cautiously, "You are the princess's fiancée. Thank you for your honesty." But Green put the wine glass in his hand on the table, and then said, "There is one thing that is not specific enough. Old sir, the Gates of the Moon is one of the territories of the Crab family." He spread his hands and said, "As my future wife, the princess will share my glory. At the same time, she also has the obligation to maintain the rule of Crab." The old knight was a little confused. Although he looked calm, he was full of doubts. Earl Green seemed to be talking about the responsibilities and obligations of a traditional wife in Westeros, but what exactly did the young ruler in front of him want to tell him? He really didn't like playing with words. He pointed at himself and said, "I'm sorry, Lord Green, I'm old, and my mind is not as clever as that of young people." The old knight's face was full of traces of time. "Perhaps more direct words are more suitable for me here. Thank you for your frankness, old sir." Green's eyes narrowed slightly, and said, "What I mean is, you seem to intend to shake the rule of Crab, Barristan Selmy." Sir Barristan was surprised at first, then he stood up suddenly and said, "Lord Green, although I have lost my honor, I will not accept slander." Green raised his hand to signal Brienne to step down, and he slowly stood up. "Old sir, it's not slander, it's the fact." He took a step forward. "You warned me about the danger of revealing the princess's identity in advance. That's because, after seeing the three dragons, you had the hope of restoring the old order before you lost your honor." He gradually approached. "As long as there is enough time, there is a great chance, because they will sooner or later grow into real dragons, just like the 3 dragons of Aegon the Conqueror. Green stood in front of Sir Barristan. Among them, what do you think of Crab? A thugger guard? Is the huge crab territory just a dragon's nest? Barristan shook his head. I never thought so. I'm glad that you are the princess's fiancé. Very good, this shows that you still have the heart of a knight. But, Green looked directly at the old knight. The unintentional act you mentioned will lead to the facts I said, Sir Barristan, he added. My ruling area includes the Crab Claw Peninsula and the valley, or you can say, I don't even have an heir, and the same is true for the princess's family. We are about to form a new family, and her children will inherit everything from us. As the princess's iron guard, you put Crab on the opposite side of the princess and think. Isn't this shaking Crab's rule? Green looked at the old knight whose expression became heavy, and then said, your unintentional act will destroy the greatest force to protect the princess. Is this what you call the road to atonement, old sir? After hearing the cruel facts narrated by Green, the fearless Barristan unconsciously took a half step back. He murmured, how could it be? This is impossible. Green said directly, although you are on the road of atonement, your eyes are still blinded by your pride. Every decision you make is as arrogant as it was back then. I think, in today's meeting, you didn't even consider the princess's own thoughts. You arrogantly made decisions for others again, old sir. Green turned around and said as he walked, I am not Ares I, nor Robert I. Sir Barristan was still stunned there. Green sat back in his chair and said, I hope you can listen to my frank words, and I hope there won't be a next time. This is a solemn warning. After Sir Barristan left in a trance, Brienne glanced at Green from time to time. Green leaned against the armrest and smiled, then looked at her and said, Brittany, what do you want to say? Brienne's thick lips moved and said, Lord Green, I see the condition of Sir Selmy. Can he fulfill his duties well? Green chuckled and said, the old sir will figure it out. He's the fearless Barristan. Brienne hesitated for a moment and said, is Sir Barristan reliable? Lord Green was very patient with Brienne. He explained, he has value that no one else can replace. He can be loyal to the princess only, but the premise is that he cannot affect Crab's rule. He picked up the wine glass. This is exactly the purpose of my saying those words to the old sir. The sun gradually rose higher, and the warm sunlight shone into the house. Green squinted his eyes. He took a sip of wine and said, the order under power cannot tolerate negligence. This is similar to fighting a war. If you want to deal with the enemy with all your strength, you must first. Listening to Green's words, Brienne suddenly remembered what happened before, chapter 264. She interrupted awkwardly, my lord, I just want to be your guard until I can no longer perform my duties. Green was slightly stunned. He remembered that he once wanted to appoint Brienne as a Knight of the Bloody Gate. He smiled and said, okay, I respect your wishes. We will see it through to the end. Hearing Green's promise, Brienne showed a happy smile like a child. After knocking on the door, the figure of butler Cyrana appeared at the door. My lord, Her Royal Highness invites you to breakfast. Lord Green worked hard every day. 3 days later, Green led an army of 100 Valley cavalrymen and 200 clan soldiers, with a total of nearly 1,000 war horses, out of the Bloody Gate. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 291 The Lioness Good Night. At night, in the Queen Mother's bedroom in Meek Tower, Cersei Lannister was wearing a soft and smooth snow-white nightgown, with her golden curly hair scattered on her shoulders, flickering faintly in the moonlight. The wineglass in her hand reflected the candlelight in the room, and the summer red in the glass rippled slightly. Queen Mother Cersei stood barefoot in front of the window, and she seemed unable to feel the coolness of the stone slabs under her feet. The breeze outside the window blew gently, lifting Queen Cersei's hair. She took a sip of summer red and said, "Are you sure?" Osney Kettleblack secretly looked at Cersei's charming back and said, "Yes, Your Majesty, it's absolutely true." His Adam's apple rolled, and he continued, "I dressed up as a monk and heard some of Sir Lancel's confession to the High Septon. He mentioned strong wine, and you, his crying, because of the distance, I couldn't hear it clearly." Queen Cersei's voice was cold. "Dear God Osney, have you seen Lancel with your own eyes?" Sir Osney swallowed secretly and replied, "Yes, Although Sir Lancel survived the serious injury, his brown hair turned gray, and he is now as fragile as an old man. A sneer appeared at the corner of Queen Cersei's mouth. He is indeed a useless guy, cowardly and stupid. She drank the wine in the glass in one gulp, then placed the glass on the small round table beside her. After a pause, she said, "Come here, Osney, as you command." Osney walked away. Cersei looked out the window at the night sky and said, "Stand beside me." Queen Cersei's voice sounded like a call from the seven gods to Osney. He suppressed his excitement and said, "Yes, your majesty." Sir Osney came to stand beside Queen Cersei, pretending to admire the starry night view. From time to time, Sir Osney glanced at the side secretly, and the corner of Queen Cersei's mouth curled slightly. Queen Cersei continued to look out a window silently. The bright moon was hanging high in the sky, and the bright moonlight cast a layer of silver light on Amidst. Queen Cersei raised her graceful chin. She knew very well when a man was most obedient. "Sir, is your sword sharp?" Queen Cersei's voice was gentle. She turned her body sideways and raised her gem-like green eyes to look at her young guard. Sir Osney's body couldn't help but turn around. In his sight, the white seemed to be glowing. After a moment of concentration, he quickly looked away and took a step back. I'm sorry, please forgive my intrusion." Osney seemed to not know what to say. A crisp and seductive low laugh came from his ears, and Queen Cersei's rosy lips opened slightly. "Really cute." Queen Cersei approached Osney, stretched out her soft hand, and said, "Osney, I haven't heard your answer yet." With a light grab, Osney's body suddenly froze, and he immediately replied, "I am your sharpest sword." Queen Cersei said again, "Will you watch your queen mother being slandered?" The force was gradually increasing layer by layer, and Osney couldn't help but take a breath of cold air, and said, "I, absolutely, will not let that person go." Queen Cersei showed a look of satisfaction, and said, "Don't let people know. Many people are watching me, your majesty. You just need to tell me the target." Osney's breathing was heavy. High Bishop. Hiss. Queen Cersei stared at Osney with her beautiful eyes, whispering with temptation. "Reward a loyal knight with a nod of pleasure. You have served your queen well and have been rewarded for it." Sir Osney hesitated. Queen Cersei retracted her magic claws, touched his cheek, and said, "Are you scared, my good knight?" After being freed from the magic claws, Osney felt a deep sense of loss in his heart. He looked directly at Queen Cersei with bloodshot eyes, and then Osney Kettleblack was lost. The young new knight could not refuse Cersei's beauty. He also wanted to have both power and beauty. "Your majesty, I am your man, and I will do whatever you say." After Sir Osney left, Queen Cersei put on her soft gold-rimmed slippers. Swish, she hummed a little tune, picked up the wine pot, and poured wine into the glass. At most 1 month. Queen Cersei came to the window again, and she was in a good mood and took a sip of summer red. The corners of her mouth curled up proudly. When her 2 swords returned, even the old lion would not be able to force her. When the wine in the glass was almost empty, Queen Cersei's eyes fixed. And Lancel, that fool, must be expelled from King's Landing before Jaime returns. It would be best if. The face of the old lion suddenly appeared in her mind. Queen Cersei thought about it and finally gave up a more effective method. Holding the wine glass tightly, Queen Cersei snorted coldly. It is rumored that when Robb Stark announced the specific time of his wedding with Jean, Black Valder burned the Direwolf flag directly in the barracks. Afterwards, Black Valder led the twins' army and left Riverrun directly. Not long after, the Red Castle messenger, the second son of Lord Tywin, Tyrion Lannister, and the Tully family discussed a marriage. On the way, Black Valder received a raven from Lord Valder and hurried back to Riverrun. After meeting King Robb, Black Valder humbly begged for forgiveness and presented a large amount of jewels to show the blessing of the Frey family for Robb and Jean's wedding. At Riverrun, as the negotiations progressed, Tyrion hung the roaring lion flag of the Lannister family outside the inn he booked. Tyrion was drunk and his tongue was jumping. "I like the golden corridor and the lion's mouth of Casterly Rock the most, and the Hall of Heroes. When the tide comes, you can hear the sound of thunder there." Edgemure Tully seemed not to hear Tyrion's enthusiastic words. He just drank a sip of wine in a depressed mood. Tyrion glanced at the listless Edgemure, poured him a glass of wine and said, "Edgemure, tomorrow is your nephew's wedding. You should be happy." "Of course I'm happy. Although time is tight, I have used the best of everything." As he said that, Edgemure took a sip of wine. He stared at Tyrion with a smile on his face for a while, and couldn't help asking, "Why is our peace talks always delayed, Edmure? You know, I am very sincere." Tyrion shrugged. He then spread his hands helplessly. "The problem is the withdrawal of the Lannister-Tyrell coalition from the Riverlands. My request is to sign a marriage agreement before withdrawing, but King Stark's requirement is that our army must withdraw from the Riverlands first before we can talk to him about your marriage with my sister." Edmure frowned and said, "Why do I feel like war is going to break out again?" Tyrion scratched his cheek and said, "Edmure, you see, the Lannisters are very sincere." There was a hint of worry in his voice. "It should not be." Tyrion stretched out his little hand and patted Edmure, comforting him. "A wonderful marriage is like a delicious fruit. It takes time to brew. Wait a minute, it will be sweeter." He grinned. "Sweet and ripe fruit, it will burst with juice when you bite it." Edmure coughed lightly, and he changed the subject abruptly. "Tomorrow, Robb's wedding will entertain everyone in Riverrun. I have prepared a good seat for you, Tyrion." "Edmure, thank you so much. This opportunity is rare. I will enjoy it." Tyrion paused, his expression darkened, and he sighed. Edmure asked in confusion, "What's wrong, my friend?" Chapter 292 Wedding, 4700. Tyrion shook his head silently. Seeing his sad expression, Edmure said again, "Is it because of the negotiations?" "It doesn't matter. Don't mind me. I just get upset when I see the weasel faces of the Frey family. I have the patience to wait. Just like you said, it takes time to bear fruit." Tyrion forced a smile and said, "Thank you, I know, this is a good thing. To be honest, I also look forward to the Lannisters and Tully becoming a family as soon as possible." Edmure, his smile became bitter. "I just mentioned the wedding that everyone can attend, which made me think of Jaime." Tyrion sighed again, and Edmure said in embarrassment, "Sir Jaime is Robb's prisoner." Tyrion noticed the vigilance flashing in Edmure's eyes, and he quickly interrupted, "No, Edmure, I won't make such an excessive request." He smiled like a treacherous minister. "Jaime has been locked against the wall for a long time, and he has been punished. While King Stark is holding a lively wedding, unlock him and at least make him more comfortable in the cell." "Okay," he grinned, "if we can give him some of the wine and food at the wedding, the Lannisters will always remember Lord Edmure's kindness and generosity." "That's possible." Edmure pondered for a moment, nodded slowly, and said, "I can arrange this." Seeing Edmure agreed, Tyrion picked up the flagon and poured wine like a wine waiter, his face full of gratitude. "Edmure, my sister Cersei will be grateful for your kindness all her life. My poor sister has finally waited for a truly good husband. Thank you for the blessing of the old seven gods." Hearing the praise, Edmure straightened his back unconsciously. Although Tyrion is a dwarf, he is the second son of Duke Tywin after all, and he has also served as the Prime Minister. He is in a good mood. Tyrion's smile is very flattering. "My future brother-in-law, let Jaime sleep well tonight." Late at night, in the main castle of Riverrun, Brynden Tully stopped his nephew who had just returned. He frowned and said, "Edmure, tomorrow is King Robb's wedding. As his uncle, you should rest early." Edmure's drunken blue eyes seemed to ask, "Why haven't you rested yet?" Sir Brynden sighed secretly. He said patiently, "Edmure, I'm old. Everyone would rather see a spirited heir to Riverrun and the king's uncle standing beside King Robb." Edmure scratched his hair and said, "Uncle, don't worry, I will take good care of Robb." Sir Brynden nodded. Before Edmure entered the room, he reminded him, "Stay away from the Lannister envoys until the negotiations are over." Edmure paused and said drunkenly, "Okay, I will, uncle." In the bedroom, Jean Westerling stood up and said, "Mother, Sybil Spicer looked a little old. She and her daughter both had chestnut curly hair and brown eyes. Her manners were dignified and elegant." Lady Sybil stepped forward and gently held Jenny's hand, saying, "I came to see you. You seem uneasy." Jenny was silent for a while, and whispered, "I want to do my best to take good care of Robb, but I don't think I can help him. I don't know what to do." Patting the back of Jenny's hand, Lady Sybil said gently, "My good daughter, let's sit down and talk to me about what happened." The two of them sat down on the bench in the room. Seeing Jenny silent again, Lady Sybil comforted her, "Jenny, don't be sad alone. I am your mother. Even if I can't help you, at least speaking out will make you feel better." Jenny shook her head slightly. "I just don't know how to say it, Mother." After a pause, she said slowly, "Robb, he hasn't eaten much since he executed Earl Karstark that day. Today, I asked Loram, Jenny's younger brother and Robb's squire, to send a sumptuous dinner, including roasted wild boar ribs, diced onions and his favorite ale, but he didn't move much. Every night, he sits in front of the map, checking it silently. I asked him what he was looking for, but he didn't say anything. I don't think he heard me at all. Her eyes were red. Robb is lonely and angry. He is so pitiful. I want to be a good wife to him, but I don't know what to do. I don't know how to encourage him and cheer him up. I don't know what he needs. Jean held Lady Sibel's hand tightly, which was marked by the years, and said, "Mother, please teach me what to do." Lady Sibel gently wiped the corner of Jean's eyes with her thumb, and said softly, "Jenny, when you decided to marry King Robb, I told you that you are more than just a wife. Tomorrow is your wedding with the king, and you are marrying the king's kingdom. What I can tell you is that you have to learn to be patient and understand your king. Sometimes, doing nothing and accompanying him silently is also a kind of support. He loves you and needs you. I believe your king will be back to you soon." Jenny nodded gently. Lady Sibel rubbed her little face and said, "My daughter, the king must have an heir. This is the responsibility and obligation of the queen. This is also what King Robb needs your help most." Jenny said shyly, "Robb also understands his responsibility. Except for the days after the execution, we try every day, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. Every night, I pray to the Virgin Mary. I believe I will soon conceive Robb's heir." Lady Sibel looked at her daughter with a blush on her cheeks, paused, and said, "I will prepare drinks for you every morning as usual. That is what my grandmother taught me. It is made with herbs, milk and ale. It will help you conceive a child as soon as possible." Jenny's mother gave birth to 4 children for her father. She was moved and grateful to hug Lady Sibel. Lady Sibel's hand froze for a moment, and she said, "I will pray to the gods for you every night, my good daughter." The next day, Robb and Jean's wedding was grand and solemn. In the Cathedral of Riverrun, the Bishop of the Riverlands personally presided over the wedding, and Robb and Jean were standing in front of the tall statues of the Father and the Virgin. Jean Westerling wore a blue dress representing purity and loyalty, and her cloak was the sandy gold of the Westerling family. Robb Stark wore a black slim robe, and his cloak was the silver gray of the Stark family. Under the witness of the gods, Robb and Jean made 7 marriage vows, received 7 layers of blessings, and exchanged 7 promises. Then, according to tradition, the Bishop of the Riverlands asked the spectators if anyone questioned the wedding. At this time, many people secretly looked in the direction of the Frey family. Black Valder, who was standing in the front, just grinned, revealing a mouthful of uneven yellow teeth. No one stepped forward to question or challenge. The hymn of the 7 gods was sung, and it was time to change cloaks. After changing each other's cloaks, King Robb solemnly put the queen's crown on Jean. Amid various blessings, he bowed his head and kissed his queen deeply. The Bishop of the Riverlands solemnly announced, "From this moment on, King Robb Stark and Queen Jean Westerling will be one body, one heart, and one soul. May the gods bless them." As soon as his voice fell, there was a wave of cheers. The wedding ceremony ended. Brynden Tully, Gregan, and Jean's brother, Sir Reynold, led the team out of the September with 20 or so stark grey robes. King Robb and Queen Jean followed behind, and the Queen's younger brother, Loram, carried a basket to scatter petals for the 2 of them. Next came Edgemere Tully and Jean's father, Gwalm Westerling, followed closely by Lady Sybil and Jean's younger sister, Elenia Westerling. Then came the Northern vassal and the Riverlands vassal, led by Lord Roose Bolton and Black Valder. Finally, came Tyrion and the others who had been huddled in a corner. Walking out of the September, Tyrion took a deep breath of fresh air, limping along with his short legs, and said, "Bronn, I need to pee before the wedding banquet." Finding a slightly hidden place, Tyrion glanced at the little servant who stood silently behind him, and said in a complaining tone, Podrick Payne, if you want to pee too, stay away from me." Although Podrick was puzzled by Tyrion's strange order, he obediently walked to another place. Seeing this, Bronn grinned, "My lord, Pod is innocent. He must be wondering why you are staying away from him at this time. He will understand sooner or later." "Well, I plan to help him. Don't look at me like that, I'm only responsible for paying the money. I will help him understand what a man's bed pleasure is." Bed, shaking, Tyrion tidied his clothes, and pondered. Little Wolf swept across the westerly. He can win on the battlefield, but he may lose the war in bed. Bronn glanced around sharply and lowered his voice. "Master Tyrion, this is a wolf's den." Tyrion shrugged and said, "I'm a little disappointed. Little Wolf's bride is not as stunningly beautiful as I imagined. If Cersei knew this, she would definitely be more proud, Bronn said puzzledly. Does Queen Cersei care about such things? Tyrion grinned. Cersei cares a lot about someone being more beautiful than her. I discovered it by accident. I also thought about using the beauty of Lady Little Wolf to make my good sister leave Meagher on her own initiative. Alice, Bronn looked at Tyrion, who was sighing and couldn't help but sigh. My lord, the Lannisters are indeed a loving family. Evening was still an hour away, but the main hall of Reverin was already brightly lit, and the torches on each wall were all lit. The guests who had arrived stood behind the long table. The lords and ladies who were entering the door were informed of their names and titles by the heralds in turn, and then escorted to the seats arranged in advance by the waiters. Both sides of the hall were full of musicians, including drummers, flute players and violinists, and some played horns, harps and leather bagpipes. When King Robb and Queen Jean appeared, the maids scattered countless colorful petals. After everyone was seated, the Bishop of the Riverlands led the people in the hall to pray. After the prayer was finished, King Robb announced, "Pour the wine." Hearing the voice fall, the waiters and maids were busy pouring wine for the wine glasses in front of the guests. King Robb smiled, raised his cup, and said loudly, "To my wife, Queen Jean." "Long live Queen Jean," Griejen took the lead in responding loudly. "To your Royal Highness, long live Queen Jean. Long live Queen Jean. Long live Queen Jean." Roar. 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 Under the influence of the northern vassal, everyone in the hall shouted the war cry of the ancestors. Hundreds of glasses rang at the same time, announcing the official start of the wedding banquet of King Robb and Queen Jean. The musicians played the sweet My Beloved Wife, and King Robb and Queen Jean smiled at each other. In the lively atmosphere, one cup after another, the night was shrouded outside the high window. Griejen and other northern vassals came to the table of the king and queen with wine glasses. Griejen's face was flushed with wine. He shouted, "King Robb, please rest assured. I promise that there will not be a piece of cloth on the queen in your bed. It is a custom in Westeros to make trouble in the bridal chamber. This custom occurs after the wedding and the wedding banquet. The guests will carry the bride and groom to the bed. On the way, the men will carry the bride and gradually tear off her clothes. The women will do the same to the groom. They throw the two naked brides and grooms on the bed before leaving the room. After that, they will wait outside the bridal chamber and shout some suggestions about the wedding night through the door." Griejen turned around and raised his wine glass as if he was mobilizing before the battle. "Long live Queen Jean." Roar. 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 The men responded in unison. Daisy Mormont, the heir of the Countess of Bear Island, shouted to Queen Jean, "Your Highness, we guarantee that you will see a glorious king in bed." Everyone burst into laughter, and King Robb smiled at the shy queen. From morning till now, the usually calm King Robb's face has almost never stopped smiling. He warned these rude nobles of the ancestors, "If you scare away my beautiful bride, I will not forgive you." Robb Stark's joke was not funny, but it was rare and made everyone laugh. Black Valder really squeezed through the crowd standing in front of the king's table and came to the front. He grinned at Queen Jean, who was sitting opposite. "Queen Jean, the people of the Riverlands are not as rude as the Northerners." As he spoke, he stared at Queen Jean's neck, his eyes showing a lewd light, and he rubbed his hands. Robb's blue eyes flashed a cold color, and at the same time, the surroundings suddenly became quiet. "Damn it!" Griejen punched Black Valder's head. Black Valder screamed in pain and crashed into the table in front of the king and queen, making the cups and plates messy. Griejen, who wanted to go forward, was held firmly by the people around him. Black Valder was barely helped up by other Walders, and his face was covered with blood. At this time, Edgemure pushed everyone aside and came to the front, followed by Seer Brynden. Edgemure was very angry. "Black Valder, don't force me to punish you." Blood flowed down Black Valder's forehead, cheeks and corners of his mouth. He wiped it casually with his big hand, slowly revealed a strange smile, and said, "I drank too much because I was too happy. Please forgive me, my future lord." Edgemure clenched his fists, and then, he looked at King Robb, who was sitting upright. Seeing Edgemure's eyes moving over, King Robb did not speak, but just nodded his chin slightly. Robb gave him the right to deal with the matter, which made Edgemure very happy. He felt that his nephew trusted him more and more. He looked at the other Walders who were supporting Black Valder, and said thoughtfully, "He is drunk, you keep an eye on him." Edgemure wanted to expel Black Valder from the wedding banquet, but after thinking about it, he gave up this plan. He didn't want to cause any real unpleasantness at his nephew's wedding. The maids heard Edmure's order and quickly cleaned up the king's table. The musicians started playing again, and the atmosphere in the hall soon relaxed. Edmure, the heir of Riverine, signaled the waiter to pour the wine, and then he raised his glass high with high spirits and said loudly, "For the health of the king and queen." The people around him raised their glasses, "For the health of the king and queen." The people around the table dispersed, leaving only Edmure and Sir Brynden. "Thank you, uncle." Robb gently held one of Jean's hands and continued, "There is no better wedding than this. Thank you for everything you have done for me." Queen Jean also expressed her sincere gratitude, and Sir Brynden was full of relief. Facing the sudden numerous compliments, Edmure was not only excited, but also seemed a little shy. The corners of his mouth could not be restrained from curling up. In order to maintain his humble image, Edmure casually grabbed a small piece of meat on the table and put it into his mouth. After chewing for a few times, Edmure swallowed the food, took another big sip of wine, and said, "Robb, we are a family, I will always," cough. With a clang, the cup in his hand suddenly fell, and the dark red wine flowed on the stone slabs on the ground. Cough 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 cough. Edmure's face became redder and redder. He reached out to grab his throat, and his nails dug blood marks on the skin, but the muscles below were as hard as stone. Cough, cough, cough. Edmure's eyes bulged out. He seemed to want to speak, but he could only squeeze out a rough sound. "Uncle." Edmure, lying in the arms of Sir Blackfish, Edmure's pupils gradually dilated. Ding dang 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 dang. Chapter 293 Hot Blood. The handsome young singer was still singing with his eyes closed. In the rainy season, the master goes riding. Hey hey, in the rainy season, women sew clothes. Hey hey, on the haystack, women are kissed. Hey 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 hey, hey hey. The hall began to become chaotic. "What's wrong? What happened? Gods, what happened to Lord Edmure?" "Lord Edmure is in trouble," Queen Jean exclaimed in disbelief. "Gods." King Robb did not have time to carefully check his uncle, who was motionless with his eyes open, and roared, "Meester! Where is the meester?" Sir Brynden knelt there, holding the stiff and gradually cold Edmure in his arms. He went to see the stranger. Sir Brynden was already in tears, and he closed Edmure's eyelids with his trembling wrinkled hands. King Robb said in disbelief, "Impossible, it can't be so fast. Where's the meester? Where's the meester? By the way, Jean knows medicine." "Jean." He turned his head and shouted loudly, "Jean! Jean!" King Robb's voice made the frightened Jean come back to her senses. She hurriedly stood up, lifted her skirt, and walked away quickly. Just as she approached, Queen Jean suddenly stopped. She suddenly felt a sharp pain, her body trembled involuntarily, and she covered her stomach tightly with her hands. King Robb turned his head again and urged, "Jean! You." Puff. Queen Jean suddenly spit out a mouthful of blood. His eyes turned red, and King Robb, who was kneeling beside Edmure, had his face stained with Queen Jean's blood. Feeling the hot blood, King Robb was shocked. He reached out to catch Queen Jean and hugged her tightly. He was panicked. "Jean, Jean, look at me, look at me." Without any response, Queen Jean's eyes gradually lost their vitality. Robb Stark screamed in pain. "No." At this time, Roose Bolton, who was standing in the crowd, looked at Jean in Robb's arms, and frowned slightly. Then, a pair of light-colored eyes suddenly looked at the other side of the crowd. Lord Roose saw Black Valder staring at Edmure, and the shock on his swollen and bloody face could not be concealed. It was completely chaotic. Some people cried, some staggered, some vomited, and some rushed to the gate desperately. Roose Bolton strode out, looking at Robb's northern vassal with a winter-like gaze. For the first time, the people present heard him speak loudly, "Northerners, maintain order." His voice rose again, "No one is allowed to leave. Those who disobey will be killed." Before the Northerners responded, Black Valder took the lead in responding loudly, "Twins! Didn't you hear Lord Bolton's order? No one is allowed to leave. Protect the king." Not long after, the thick oak door of the main castle hall slowly closed with a dull bang. In a secluded place west of Riverine, Tyrion leaned against the wall, panting, "My short legs are almost broken." At the wedding banquet, although Tyrion was arranged in a remote position near the gate, he was always paying attention to the little wolf's words and deeds. His purpose was to learn as much as possible about this young ruler. When Edmure showed abnormality, Tyrion decisively took Bronn and the little servants and others to sneak out of the main castle of the wedding banquet. Bronn's breathing just became a little heavier. He turned his head and looked in the direction of the main castle, saying, "My lord, will this cause misunderstanding?" Tyrion wiped the sweat from his face, waved his hand, and said, "Let's talk about it later. May the seven gods bless his hometown. It's better to be a misunderstanding." After a while, a Lannister in a red robe trotted over. He slowed down and said, "My lord Tyrion, the gate of the main castle is closed." There was a hint of panic in his voice. "Edgemere Tully is dead." Tyrion's pupils shrank, and Bronn said to him, "My lord, you saved us, you saved myself too." "I didn't expect." Tyrion took off the purse from his waist and threw it directly to Bronn, saying, "We must leave. People who have lost their minds will not listen to our explanations." He stared at Bronn. "It's dangerous to stay. If we escape by ourselves, Lord Tywin will never forgive us. We must take Jaime away." Bronn weighed the purse in his hand and grinned. "These are not enough, Master Tyrion." Tyrion also grinned. "This is just a small appetizer. A Lannister must pay his debts." Bronn put away the purse, patted it, and said, "My dear sir, I am at your disposal." Tyrion spoke faster. "Adam Marbrand, Jaime's childhood friend, the person arranged by Tywin to monitor him, Chapter 258, is near the cell. He will appear when he hears three birds singing. He has clothes prepared in advance. You dress up as Reveran guards and take Jaime out directly. Before you come out, help him change into the clothes of Reveran guards." Seeing that Tyrion was already prepared, Bronn said easily, "Then what?" "Such a big thing happened. I think the gates of Reveran will be closed soon. Come to the west wall, where I urinated towards the river 3 days ago. When I got nearby, I heard three birds singing." Tyrion reached out and patted Bronn's thigh. He said, "Hurry up. We don't have much time. We must hurry up. Climb down the wall and get on the raft I have hidden by the river. We will be safe, my Blackwater Knight, for the sake of the Golden Dragon." Bronn smiled and strode away. Watching Bran disappear in the dark, Tyrion secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, he had made the worst plan. That night, Edgemere Tully, the heir of Reveran, died of poisoning. That night, King Robb's queen, Jean Westerling, died of poisoning. That night, Duke Hoster Tully, who was terminally ill, heard the news of the murder of his heir. On his deathbed, he left a will, for his younger brother, Brynden Tully, to inherit Reveran. In the pale morning light, Queen Jean looked as if she was sleeping, and the Silent Sisters, who were wrapped tightly from head to toe with only their eyes exposed, stood not far away. Robb, pale and haggard, with bloodshot eyes, stood beside his wife, motionless and guarding her. Sir Brynden, who seemed to have aged a dozen years overnight, walked heavily into the September, followed by Lord Roose and Mr. Wyman of Reveran. Sir Brynden came over and patted Robb on the shoulder. His voice was filled with sadness. "I thought I had seen life and death for a long time. Now I don't even know how to comfort you, my child." Robb closed his eyes for a while and then opened them again. "Uncle, there is no mercy in the north, only blood debt must be repaid with blood." Lord Roose and Mr. Wyman saluted Robb. "Your Majesty." Robb stared at his sleeping wife and said in a hoarse voice, "What happened?" Mr. Wyman glanced at Lord Roose and saw that he was silent, so he spoke first. "King Robb, it's two poisons. Lord Edgemere was poisoned by the Strangler, which is a strong poison that can quickly suffocate a person to death, with the same symptoms as choking." After a pause, he continued, "The poison that Queen Westerling was poisoned with is very similar to the Devil's Dance grass. It can cause severe abdominal pain, vomiting blood and instant death to the poisoned person." Robb's hand gently stroked his wife's face. "Have you found the murderer?" Chapter 294 Loyalty and Loyalty. Lord Roose's answer was brief. Still interrogating, Robb turned his head to look at Lord Roose, his eyes cold. "Botan, who do you think it could be?" The light-colored eyes met Robb's for a while, and Lord Roose's small voice sounded, "Your Majesty, suspicion will make you lose your sense of justice." Robb retracted his gaze and murmured, "Justice," he said painfully, "if it is fair, the person who goes to see the stranger should be me, not my uncle and my beloved wife." The young Wolf Lord's eyes seemed to be burning with flames. He looked at Lord Roose again and said in a deep voice, "Answer my question." Lord Roose seemed unaware of Robb's anger. He looked calmly at Mr. Wyman and said, "Your Majesty, he also knows my suspicions." Robb's gaze shifted to Mr. Wyman. "Your Majesty, the poison wine was most likely replaced when the Greatjon and Black Valder had a conflict. That was the best time," Sir Brynden said. "Mr. Wyman, have you interrogated the waiters and maids who poured the wine at the time?" Mr. Wyman nodded first, then shook his head and sighed. It was very chaotic at the time. Of the 7 waiters and 7 maids present, only 2 waiters and 3 maids survived. We interrogated them, but didn't find anything suspicious. Robb frowned and said, "Why did so many die?" Lord Roose explained, "Most of the people in the hall are noble ladies and young ladies from the Riverlands. In the situation last night, we couldn't control the situation without killing people." After hesitating, he added, "The phrase contributed a lot." After a pause, Robb asked, "Bolton, is that the source of your suspicion?" Lord Roose frowned and said, "No, I will suspect everyone, Your Majesty, until I find witnesses or evidence." After Lord Roose finished speaking, Robb remained silent. Mr. Wayman could not help but speak up. "Your Majesty, Blackvalder's behavior is indeed very suspicious. For example, his sudden offensive behavior." After a pause, he continued, "For example, although he was trying to stop the chaos for you at the time, he killed and smashed too many people's heads. Of course, everyone knows that Blackvalder is bloodthirsty." King Robb whispered, "There is no evidence." Sir Brandon put a big hand on Robb's shoulder. He scratched it, and said, "Child, don't forget that you are our king." The two looked at each other. Sir Brandon nodded slightly, and then Robb also nodded and said, "Uncle, before the murderer is investigated, you will take over the defense of Riverran, and no one can enter or leave without your permission. Leave it to me." At this time, Lord Roose suddenly said, "Your Majesty, the murderer is most likely 2 people." Seeing Robb's gaze moving, he said again, "I also suspect the Lannister messenger." "They disappeared too quickly," Mr. Wayman echoed. "Some people saw that as soon as Lord Edmure showed signs of abnormality, they quietly left the wedding banquet, as if they had foreseen what was going to happen next." "King Robb," Greetjon's voice was like a bell at the door. He entered this September and said as he walked, "The Kingslayer is missing." Robb rubbed his brow and said, "Be more specific, Greetjon." "Last night, we were busy sealing off all the houses and didn't pay attention to the situation inside. The servants found it when they delivered food to the cell. The 2 guards guarding the Kingslayer had already died." Robb gritted his teeth and said, "Lannister." Lord Roose looked at Robb. "It seems that the Lannister envoys have been prepared for a long time. There are too many coincidences. It makes people suspicious," Robb said coldly. "They have planned it long ago and are just waiting for the opportunity to escape." His voice trembled with surging anger. "Lannister, Greetjon, go and prepare 500 cavalrymen, pick the best riders, 2 horses each, and pick 1,000 of the strongest war horses." "Yes, King Robb." Greetjon turned and left, and Robb looked at Sir Brandon. "Uncle, I will be back before the funeral." Sir Brandon opened his mouth slightly, sighed secretly, and said, "Don't worry." Lord Roose frowned and stepped forward. "Your Majesty, you should stay here. Please leave the pursuit of the Kingslayer to me." Robb looked at Lord Roose's ice-sculptured face and said, "Please help me keep a close eye on the Frey family, Lord of the Dreadfort." After that, he gently covered his sleeping wife with a silver-gray cloak embroidered with dire-wolves. That night, the Lannisters who successfully escaped from Riverran rested on a bank of the Red Fork River. Tyrion leaned against a small tree, and next to him was a pair of muddy boots that he had taken off. Footsteps were heard, and the bearded Jaime Lannister came over and sat aside. Tyrion turned his head and looked at the bonfire not far away, and said, "Brother Jaime, you should warm yourself up more often." Sir Jaime smiled relaxedly. "I have been in the cell for a long time, and I am not used to the firelight." Tyrion laughed. "I am sure you have closed your eyes the whole time on the raft." He took a sip from the wine bag and threw it to Jaime. When Jaime caught the wine bag, Tyrion grinned. "I know you want to kiss me because you are touched. Use this instead. I only like the kiss of a beautiful woman." "Brother." After listening to his brother's complaint, Sir Jaime couldn't help laughing. He took a big gulp of wine from the wine bag. He handed the wineskin to Tyrion and said, "Thank you anyway, Tyrion." Tyrion took the wineskin and shrugged, saying, "You can thank me when we arrive safely in King's Landing." He pointed to the dried blood on Sir Jaime's left forearm and said, "Is it serious? I've hidden horses in the town ahead. If it's serious, find a doctor when you take the horses away. Apart from that town, it's best not to show up in front of other people's eyes. I'm worried that the little wolf will send pursuers." "It's just a minor injury." Jaime smiled nonchalantly. "I've been in a cell for a long time, and even my movements have become slow. It's just a cut from a sword." Tyrion smiled, took a sip of wine, and stopped talking. The surroundings were quiet, with only the occasional chirping of insects breaking the silence. The breeze was caressing him, and Sir Jaime stared into the distance, thinking. After a long while, Jaime's voice suddenly rang out, "Tyrion, is Cersei okay?" Tyrion sighed, spread his hands and said, "Jaime, you finally asked me something I don't want to talk to you about." In Jaime's slightly puzzled eyes, Tyrion said again, "Jaime, listen to my advice, leave Cersei, she is not worthy of your loyalty." Loyalty? Jaime's green eyes trembled slightly. After a pause, he said, "It is my duty to protect her." Tyrion scratched his head, hesitated for a moment, and said, "Jaime, you may be loyal, but Cersei is not. I mean the loyalty on the bed." He pinched his chin. "As for duty, many people can replace you, and Cersei is also very happy." Sir Jaime frowned. He stared at his smiling brother for a while, and said, "Tyrion, make it clear." Tyrion spread his hands and said helplessly, "Okay." His upper body leaned forward slightly. "Brother Jaime, when you were locked in the dark cell, many young and handsome knights were comforting Sister Cersei, so she was very happy every day." He grinned. "For example, our cousin. Although Lancel can't wield a sword as well as you, but I heard that Cersei likes his galloping on the bed." Chapter 295 Green's Doubts. "Tyrion," Sir Jaime shouted angrily. He seemed to feel that his tone was a bit harsh, so he slowed down and advised, "Tyrion, don't make such jokes. Cersei is your sister after all." Tyrion still smiled and said, "Of course she is my sister, and also your twin sister, Jaime." Sir Jaime was slightly stunned and nodded slowly. Tyrion grinned, "But Cersei is not just your sister." Sir Jaime's face froze for a moment. He stared at his brother for a while and said, "Don't joke anymore, Tyrion." When he was about to change the subject, Tyrion's voice sounded first, "Brother Jaime, I have known about the things between you and Cersei for a long time. Perhaps I know more than you." Sir Jaime's face was complicated. Tyrion laughed, "Actually, I admire you, Jaime Lannister. Not only did you kill King Targaryen, you also inherited their family's old tradition." Sir Jaime. After a moment of silence, Sir Jaime moved his lips and whispered, "I love her." The smile on Tyrion's face faded, and he said, "She doesn't deserve your love." His brother's words were harsh, and Sir Jaime tried to refute. "She loves me too," Tyrion reminded sarcastically. "Yes, she loves you, but you are just one of the people she opens her legs to." He stood up, crossed his arms, and continued, "Cousin Lancel is one of them." Is everything Tyrion said true? Is Tyrion lying to him? No, Tyrion will not lie to him. Sir Jaime grabbed his hair with both hands, shook his head, and said in pain, "Impossible." "Why?" Tyrion approached barefoot on the grass, stretched out his hand to grab Jaime's shoulder, and said, "End your mirror game as soon as possible, otherwise you will only suffer more." Sir Jaime sat alone by the river, sleepless all night. At dawn, the group was preparing to set off. Sir Jaime, with a haggard face, found Tyrion and said, "I don't believe Cersei will betray me. I will confirm it with her in person." Tyrion shrugged, "Okay, but I have to remind you that sometimes the truth is more difficult to accept than a lie." He reminded, "Brother Jaime, don't forget that King's Landing has a kind father, and a little king, who is proud of being Robert's son." Sir Jaime paused. He turned his head to glance at Tyrion before leaving. His back looked like a person running away. When it was dawn, they got the horses that Tyrion had prepared in advance in the dilapidated town. Rumors spread at an insane rate, and the Lannister guards, disguised as sellswords and guarding the horses, brought bad news. "Lord Tyrion, people say that you are the queen who killed Edmure Tully and King Stark. I also heard that King Stark left Riverrun with thousands of troops and vowed to execute you personally." Tyrion looked at the sky and sighed. "They really think highly of me." Sir Jaime looked very pale. He forced a smile and joked in a hoarse voice, "The Lannister giants are about to become the nightmare of the people in the Riverlands." Tyrion scratched his hair and said, "I think they prefer to call me the Little Devil affectionately. To be honest, I just hope that the rumor that the Little Wolf will come to catch me personally is a rumor." Combing his hair with his fingers, Tyrion said seriously, "Whether it is true or not, we'd better leave quickly. If we are really caught, Lord Tywin will not care whether I live or die." He looked at Jaime and said worriedly, "Brother, you look very bad." Sir Jaime shook his head slightly. "I'm fine, let's go quickly. Don't underestimate Stark's stubbornness. That little wolf may really lead troops to pursue. I have lived in enough cells." Sir Jaime had just sat on the saddle when his childhood friend, Adam Marbrand, rode closer and said, "Jaime, what's wrong with you?" Sir Jaime pulled the reins and said, "I'm fine, Adam." Then, in the afternoon, the group was riding on horseback, but Sir Jaime swayed in the saddle, slowly tilted, and fell heavily from the horse. 5 days later, a roadside inn near the King's Road, north of the town of Earl Haraway. There was a blazing fire in the center of the hall. Next to it, the inn's staff were busy serving steaming food and full glasses of wine to the guests. The air was filled with a strong smell of wine and food, and the guests sat around the rough wooden table, drinking and talking loudly. The Lannister imp cut Lord Edmure's throat with a purple sword. "Oh, my Lord Edmure, I heard that the imp drank Lord Edmure's blood from the wine glass. Oh, gods, it's too cruel, please punish me. I heard that Lord Edmure died of poisoning." "Yes, I heard that too. Lord Edmure and the Queen were both poisoned to death." "The Queen is dead." "Which Queen?" "Haha, there are kings and queens everywhere, even the White Walkers can't count how many there are. It's the Queen of the King of the Trident. I'm telling the truth. She died at the wedding banquet in Riverine, also poisoned to death." "Gods, who'll dare to drink at the wedding banquet in the future? Only the nobles need to worry about that kind of thing. What does it have to do with us?" Next to the wooden railing upstairs, Lord Green, who has a keen hearing, raised his eyebrows slightly. Could it be that Edmure Tully is really dead? Green's brown eyes trembled slightly. Who did it? Who could it be? Jean Westerling was also killed? Green picked up the wine glass and shook it gently. It seemed that the person behind the scenes deliberately left Robb Stark behind. If these rumors are true. Green's eyes narrowed slightly. The door of the hall downstairs was suddenly opened, and Brienne strode in. The noisy voices stopped for a moment, and then resumed immediately. Thump, thump, thump. Brienne walked up the wooden stairs and hurried to where Green was. Bremer glanced at Monton, whose mouth was full of barbecue, and leaned over to whisper in Green's ear. After listening, Green tapped his chin lightly, paused, and his fingers tapped slowly on the table. He could now be sure. Edmure and Jean were indeed dead. Robb was leading his troops to search for Tyrion and Jaime, who had escaped from Riverine. Edmure. Edmure Tully. Jaime. Tyrion. The wedding at Riverine. Poisoning. Robb Stark. Lannister. Lord Tywin. Green's eyes trembled. Was this to deepen the hatred between the wolf and the lion? To poison the air of Riverine and Riverine, it was inevitable that someone trusted by Tully or Stark would be the insider. There must be huge interests involved. Green's slender fingers paused slightly, but why did the man behind the scenes add Jean Westerling, and what was the purpose? If they wanted to deal with the Robb group, wouldn't it be more beneficial to put Jean Westerling there? Wait. Normally, whether it was Jaime as a prisoner or Tyrion as an envoy, it would be difficult for them to escape from Riverine under such circumstances. Could it be that the real target of the man behind the scenes was the two of them, or one of them? Seeing Tyrion and the others, Lord Green could almost guess the real mastermind behind the scenes, but he could at least be sure of one thing at this moment, that the Lannister brothers who were still on the run could be in danger at any time because the wolves were chasing them. Chapter 296 Different Choices. Green had the barbecue on the table taken away, and as the recipient, Monton laughed. Spreading the map of the Riverlands that he had bought at a high price on the empty table, Green lowered his head and began to read. Harrenhal is in the hands of the Lannisters, and the defender is Sir Amory Lorch. Chapter 221. His eyes stayed on its position for a while, and his sight slowly moved westward along the river road. After a pause, his finger pointed at the location of Riverine, and then slowly moved eastward along the river road. If he wanted to find Tyrion and Jaime, he needed to disperse him and his soldiers as much as possible, but this was not wise. After all, the Riverlands were still a battlefield. Therefore, the best way was to let Tyrion know where he was in the Riverlands. After thinking about it, as a nouveau riche, Lord Green decided to spend money. Anyone who could provide Green with the whereabouts of Tyrion and others, or anyone who could provide Tyrion with the Green's location, or an escort, could all receive a generous reward from Lord Green. Being in the enemy camp of Stark Tully, would Green be targeted by them and put in danger by making such a big show? Unless he got carried away, the plains of the Riverlands could not stop the more than 1,000 Vale horses he brought. After leaving the inn, Green handed the arrangement of the bounty to Engway, who had been a mercenary. After setting various bounty amounts, the careful Lord Green, in order to rouse the enthusiasm of more people as soon as possible, promised in addition to the Golden Dragon, that the Vale would shelter those who betrayed Stark Tully in the future. Then, the news of Green Crab's bounty spread again in the Riverlands at an unreasonable speed. 2 days later, The light of the rising sun shone on the breeze-blown river surface, and the banks of the Red Fork River were red soil as smooth as a road. Small streams flowed into the big river, and the submerged rotten branches were still leaning against the shore. Not far away, there were birch, oak and chestnut trees. Green and his party kept passing many small wooden houses supported by long poles along the way. They were very simple. There was no sign of habitation, only birds flying overhead or chirping on branches on the shore. The countless tributaries of the Trident River provided convenience for people and goods to travel through the river. When there was no war, Green heard, the river was full of small fishing boats, large grain transport ships and merchant floating boats, and even colorfully painted and extremely fancy theater boats would pass by villages and castles along the coast. Now, the war between Stark Tully and Lannisters took away everything. Green passed by the village, but did not see any villagers. They saw oak trees full of dead women hanging near a big house. They turned and swayed in the breeze. In the team, the young Vale cavalry said angrily, "Massacre, this is a shameless massacre. This is not a chivalrous act." The nearby Vale cavalry echoed, "Damn butchers, they cannot be forgiven." The corpses exuded the smell of rotten fruit. Green's eyes narrowed slightly. The wooden sign hung on the neck of the highest corpse read, "A bitch slept with a lion." Many people also noticed the words on the wooden sign and said in disbelief, "Gods, it was Stark and Tully who did it. Poor woman, what sin did she commit?" The Vale cavalrymen who followed Green out of the bloody gate had not really seen the cruelty of war, and they kept scolding. Seeing that Green remained silent, a new Vale knight beside him said, "Lord Green, they should be in maids." He pointed to the burnt house. "I remember this inn. I stayed here overnight before the war started. I think these girls entertained the Lannister soldiers, so they got the traitor's collar. Maybe they brought them food and drink, or maybe, just for a kiss and a glass of beer." Green nodded his chin lightly. What he saw and heard on the road told him that the Tully family's rule in the Riverlands was collapsing. Lord Hoster and his heir Edmure Tully have passed away. Although Lord Hoster's younger brother, Brynden Tully, inherited the title of Lord of Riverrun, he had been away from the Riverlands for more than a decade, and he did not have the natural cohesion of Edmure. Moreover, Lord Brynden was already over 50 years old, and he had no children of his own. The vassals of the Riverlands were faced with the difficult problem of having to make a reasonable choice. Lord Brynden needed time and a stable situation to reconsolidate the Tully family's rule over the Riverlands, but there was also Robb Stark, who claimed to be the king of the North and the Trident, in the Riverlands. Lord Ned had to defend the North against the invasion of the Iron Islands, and Robb and Brynden would not get any other support in the short term. It can be said that, they only had an army that would become smaller and smaller as they fought, and Robb's dynasty was doomed to be short-lived. Unless, Robb's army could defeat Lannister in one fell swoop and break through King's Landing. Another option is to give up the Riverlands, retreat to the north, and give up the King's crown, and take the initiative to make peace with Lannister to avoid Lannister and Greyjoy joining forces to attack the north. But, this also means that the Tullys' rule in the Riverlands will become history, and retreating to the north also means that Robb has given up the Tullys. The Tullys have no choice, unless Brynden Tully sends Robb's head to the Red Keep. They can't do it, they can only fight. The Lannister army that just defeated Stannis needs to rest, but they will face the Stark-Tully coalition that is actively seeking a fight. Green's eyes trembled. Dorne is too far away, it seems. Because of Edmure's death, the biggest beneficiaries may be Marigold and Golden Rose. Green's eyes moved slightly. Jean Westerling. Could it be, there is another person behind the scenes? A sight that moved from time to time made Green retract his thoughts, and he looked at Brienne beside him. Seeing Green looking at her, Brienne's thick lips moved for a while, and said, "Lord Green, they are innocent, I want to bury them." Green nodded slightly. "Brienne, you have a knight's compassionate heart. Go, find a few more people." Thinking of Brienne's dull character, he directly ordered, "Sir, help Brienne bury those helpless people." The lower branches of the oak tree were large enough for a person to stand. Brienne climbed up the trunk, holding a dagger in her hand, and walked through the leaves to chop off the corpses. When the body fell, flies surrounded it all of a sudden. The more bodies fell, the heavier the stench became. Below, some people dug pits, some carried them, and occasionally rebuked the butcher's evil deeds while busy. The sun shone directly, and Lord Green blinked his eyes. He seemed to see the light of justice radiating from Crab's soldiers. His ears moved slightly, and the Riverlands filled with wailing seemed to be calling for its new ruler. Green paused his dream, and the corners of his mouth curved slightly. He lightly kicked the horse's belly, and the horse walked towards the river. Smoke was swirling up, and Montan squinted his eyes, roasting trout just caught from the river by the campfire. In the distance, Green sat on a folding wooden chair and looked at the map in his hand. Ta-da-da, the sound of horse hooves came from afar. After a while, anger appeared. He jumped off his horse and came to Green, patting his chest and said, "Lord Green." Green looked away from the map and said, "Is there any news?" Anger nodded and said, "3 hunters, a father and son who fished, and an old farmer's family. They saw the Lannisters. Because of the distance, most people thought Lord Tyrion was a child, and that's why I believe the news provided by those people." After thinking for a while, he continued, "According to the news provided by those people, they passed by the Kneeling Inn about 2 days ago. The Kneeling Inn is located on the south bank of the Red Fork River bend. This is where the King of the North, Tormund Stark, knelt and surrendered to Aegon the Conqueror. It is rumored that after the Battle of Field of Fury, Tormund, the King of the North, personally led the northern army southward, but when he saw the dragon with his own eyes, he bent his knees and handed over the copper and black iron sword crown." After listening, Green stared at the map for a while and said, "Ange, we can narrow the search area." Jaime lay on the wooden board, looking at the clear night sky. The night was strangely beautiful, with an elegant crescent moon and an unprecedented number of stars. The crown was at the zenith, with a horse and Cygnus next to it, and the Shalluna half hidden on the pine branches. Tyrion limped over, squatted down, and looked at the festering wound on Jaime's forearm and his chapped lips. Tyrion, with a dirty face and disheveled hair, called out, "Jaime, Jaime." The fever made Jaime dizzy and he thought he was dreaming. He moved with difficulty, tried to force out a smile, and responded hoarsely, "Tyrion." Looking at the extremely weak Jaime, Tyrion smiled, "What a pity. I thought you had already thrown yourself into the arms of the 7 gods. You are so disrespectful." "Ha, ha, cough." Tyrion looked at Jaime's place with ill intentions and joked, "I wonder if it can still be used in the future. Well, if I'm unfortunately right, I just hope you don't become a gun-swallowing enthusiast." After that, he shuddered exaggeratedly, "Actually, as long as you don't target your dear brother, I don't mind." Cough, cough. Jaime coughed painfully. Tyrion laughed for a while, then frowned and sighed, "Brother Jaime, if you delay any longer, you will die. You really need a doctor's treatment." Jaime Lannister opened his mouth and said with difficulty, "Tyrion, I would rather die. I don't want to be a captive anymore." Tyrion tried to persuade him, "Jaime, staying alive is more important than honor." Jaime closed his eyelids and shook his head slowly. Staying alive. He did this more than a decade ago. He wore a white robe and witnessed the tragic death of the Starks, the roasting of the fully armored Duke Rickard, and the strangulation of his son Brandon to save his father. He did not choose honor, but chose to shut up and hide in his heart, not looking or thinking. Jaime slowly opened his eyes. How could the night be so charming? Ask yourself, why are the stars willing to shine for someone like him? Chapter 297. A miserable scream. The linen wrapped around his forearm turned gray and smelled of pus, and Jaime's eyes were empty. "Alice." Tyrion lay directly beside Jaime, his hands folded behind his head, one of his short legs crossed. He really didn't expect that confessing Cersei's infidelity would not cause the anger he imagined, but instead make Jaime lose the will to live. "Brother Jaime, don't you plan to ask clearly in person?" Jaime's eyes moved imperceptibly, and Tyrion's voice sounded again, "Aren't you curious? Why did Cersei do this?" Sensing that it had an effect, Tyrion said against his will, "Perhaps, Cersei, she has her own difficulties." He continued, "Perhaps, she was forced." He spoke more and more smoothly. "Cersei is isolated and helpless in the Red Castle, and she may have been forced to do this for Joffrey. If it were Jaime who was sober, he would definitely not hear Tyrion's absurd advice. He knew her, and no one could force his lioness. But, at this moment, Jaime was willing to believe it. Yes, he was not by Cersei's side, and her betrayal of him was a helpless choice. Cersei, her charming figure seemed to be right in front of him, and she was reaching out to him helplessly. Tyrion was right, he couldn't die. Cersei was waiting for him, she needed him. Yes, Cersei was still alive, he couldn't die, he was born on the same day as her, and he would die on the same day as her. Jaime's dim eyes finally had a glimmer of light. "Tyrion," Jaime whispered. He wanted to tell his brother that he would survive, and they would return to the Red Castle together alive. After a long time without a response, Jaime tilted his head slightly with difficulty, and his brother had fallen asleep in his sight. Jaime could feel Tyrion's fatigue, staring at that face. His brother was still so ugly no matter how he looked at it, and the corners of his lips curled up slightly. Late at night, there was a sudden loud noise outside the simple wooden house, and Tyrion, who was curled up on the ground, opened his eyes suddenly. Tyrion got up, held his breath and listened for a while, then glanced at Jaime who was awake, and said, "I'll go take a look." Tyrion had 2 hatchets on his waist. Just as Jaime was about to ask Tyrion for one, the wooden door was pushed open with a clang, and damp cold wind blew in. Sir Adam Margrand, Jaime's childhood friend, dressed as a hunter walked in. Tyrion tilted his head slightly, and a stranger followed behind him. The stranger was a tall, slightly hunched, kind-faced gray-haired old man with many wrinkles around his protruding brown eyes. Sir Adam looked at Jaime and saw that he was in better spirits than before he left during the day. He smiled and said, "It seems I'm not late." He pointed to the strange old man standing beside him, and said, "I brought someone who can heal you." Seeing everyone looking at him, the old man bowed slightly. "Good night, my name is Qyburn." Tyrion glanced at Sir Adam calmly and said, "Are you a Maester? Why are you here?" Qyburn's tone was gentle. "The Citadel deprived me of my Maester's necklace, Lord Lannister. As for why I'm standing here, I think you would rather listen to what the Sir has to say." Tyrion grinned. "I like your answer. Something interesting must have happened here. So, do you know medicine?" Facing Tyrion's questioning, Qyburn's tone was still gentle. "The Citadel can deprive me of my Maester's necklace, but it can't deprive me of my knowledge, my lord." Tyrion stepped aside, and Qyburn came to Jaime's side to check his injuries. He put his nose close to him and sniffed, and his brows were furrowed. Jaime said hoarsely, "It's terrible? Will he die?" After a pause, Qyburn shook his head and replied, "The flesh has deteriorated, and the ulcer will spread. The most thorough way is to cut off the arm." A gloomy look flashed across Jaime's face, but he quickly said firmly, "I just need to clean the wound. Let me try my luck." Tyrion looked at Sir Adam. He silently raised his chin to the other side of the room, and limped away. Sir Adam glanced at Jaime, who had a determined look in his eyes, and followed Tyrion. Leaning against the leaky wooden wall, Tyrion stared at Qyburn and asked in a low voice, "2 questions. How did you meet him? Can he be trusted?" Sir Adam sat down on the ground, leaning against the wooden wall tiredly, and said, "Qyburn was a member of the Brave Company. Lord Tywin once hired the Brave Company to fight, and later they defected to Earl Bolton." Tyrion looked at Sir Adam. "Bolton, the skinning family in the north? Selling leather is very profitable? I should suggest my father not to work so hard mining." With a slightly gloating look on his face, Sir Adam glanced coldly and said, "When looting the Riverlands, Varga Holt of the Brave Company had a conflict with Amory and others." Chapter 272. "So he left the Lannister army." Tyrion shrugged. "Then what?" Impatient look flashed across Sir Adam's face, and he said, "Qyburn and the Brave Company got separated. I saw him at the Kneeling Inn, helping someone with treatment, so I took him over directly." Tyrion's eyes moved slightly, and said, "Don't you think it's too much of a coincidence?" Sir Adam said coldly, "Jaime needs a doctor. If he becomes a cripple, Jaime would rather die." Qyburn frowned. "I can save your upper arm and amputate it from the elbow, but there is no guarantee." Jaime's eyes were sharp. "Do as I ask, or I will strangle you to death." A hint of regret flashed in Qyburn's eyes, and he said softly, "Okay, I'll just dig out the ulcer and leave everything else alone." "Sir." He put a small bag in front, and while taking out the things inside, he said, "Treat it with boiling wine first, then apply nettle ointment, mustard seeds and bread mold. This may work." He held a small bottle and said, "I'll feed you poppy milk first. It will hurt." "No need." Jaime didn't dare to sleep, for fear that his hand would be gone when he woke up. This kind-looking old man made him feel uneasy. Qyburn insisted on feeding him poppy milk. "Sir, it's going to hurt." James was firm. "I will scream," Qyburn said helplessly. "This is going to hurt very, very much." James was even more determined. "I will scream very loudly." Qyburn pointed behind him, smiled kindly, and said, "Your companions will be watching me. You can sleep well, sir." James did not let his guard down. "No, I just need wine." Qyburn spread his hands. "Okay, lie down. I have to tie your hands first, sir." Then, Sir James screamed miserably for more than half an hour and fainted. After the treatment, Tyrion came over. He glanced at Jaime who had his eyes closed and said, "Hey, Qyburn, you're good at it." Qyburn's sternness was warm. While packing up his tools, he said, "When I was in the warriors, dealing with broken limbs was commonplace. Wherever they went, people were missing arms and legs. Interesting experience." Tyrion stared at Qyburn and continued, "Then, Mr. Qyburn, why did you happen to appear in the kneeling stack?" He grinned. "Don't tell me it was the guidance of the Seven Gods' hometown." Qyburn stopped what he was doing and said slowly, "Earl Crab has offered a high reward, and many people are looking for you. What attracted me most was his promise to shelter those who find you, which is exactly what I need most. My luck was pretty good. When I was about to give up, Sir Marbrand came to me. There will be another chapter later. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 298. The flag is flying. The news of Edmure Tully's death soon reached Maidenpool, and people were in a panic. Therefore, when Sir Marson appeared under the walls of Maidenpool with more than 3,000 cleaver blue robes, the elderly Earl William Wooten wisely chose to surrender for the survival of his family. De Cleaver, a member of the Cleaver family, married Elenor Wooten, the eldest daughter and heir of the Earl of Maidenpool, and became the governor of Maidenpool. Late that night, Osney Kettleblack, the guard of Queen Cersei, finally waited for the right opportunity. He sneaked into the Great September and suffocated the sleeping High Septon with a pillow. Under the order of King Balon of the Iron Islands, more than 100 Iron Islands-long ships carried more than 3,000 iron races to the north to support Asha Greyjoy, who was invading the north. It is rumored that a Baron Nimrus Martell, nicknamed the Red Viper, left Sunspear by boat under the order of his brother, Prince Doran, and went to King's Landing as a Dornish envoy. When Tyrion, who was born in Lannister, prepared horses just in case, he naturally chose expensive night horses. Night horses are tall, strong and beautiful, and have strong explosive power, but they need careful care, and are much inferior to northern war horses in terms of endurance. According to normal marches, this is not a big disadvantage, but after Tyrion and his party were bitten by cavalrymen riding northern war horses with excellent endurance, it became a fatal weakness. On the third day after the searched northern cavalry team discovered their whereabouts, Tyrion and his party had to abandon the horses that were foaming at the mouth. The northern cavalry may appear at any time, and then they can only rely on their legs. As night fell, the fleeing people finally had a chance to breathe. Tyrion combed his sweat-soaked hair with shaking fingers. He could swear that he had never complained so much about his short legs in his life. Today, if it weren't for the little servant, Pod, who carried him on his back at the critical moment, he would definitely kneel pitifully in front of the little wolf. He prayed to the old man of the seven gods with an unprecedented sincerity, "Bronn, bring that bastard Green to me quickly." Jaime, who was extremely pale, staggered over with the support of Sir Adam. Looking at Jaime, who slowly sat down, Tyrion grinned, "Brother Jaime, pray with me." Jaime smiled weakly, paused, and said seriously, "There are more and more northern cavalry chasing us. We have no horses and it is difficult to escape their encirclement." He moved his injured left arm slightly, and said, "What if, we can't wait for Earl Green tomorrow? Tyrion, we have to make a choice." He stared at his brother. "I am their biggest target. You and Adam hide, and I will take the others to lead the little wolf away." Tyrion stared at his brother for a while, and said, "I want to reject your kindness. If I escape back alone, our kind father will never forgive me." Jaime frowned. "Do as I say, I want you to be alive, my brother." Tyrion grinned. "Tywin will make my life more painful than death." Jaime opened his mouth and said, "Tyrion, father. No, we are all his sons." Tyrion seemed to be mocking. "Tywin doesn't want me to be his son. I knew it when I was very young." Jaime, he stretched and said, "Rather than believing in Lord Tywin's kindness, I would rather believe, or pray to the old man of the seven gods. Let Grim appear as soon as possible, and I will give him the most affectionate kiss." Tyrion's joke did not ease the solemn atmosphere. Sir Adam, who had been silent all the time, suddenly said, "Earl Crab's bounty was a mistake. It made everyone look for us like crazy. Otherwise, our whereabouts would not have been exposed so quickly." Sir Jaime frowned and said, "Adam, without Earl Grim's bounty, at least Qyburn wouldn't have come, and I wouldn't have been able to sit here and listen to your complaints." Tyrion smiled and said, "Sir Adam, I think you're just, well, rational analysis. If you meet Grim, You might be able to point out his mistakes in front of him. He likes to listen to other people's advice the most. Sir Jaime glanced at Tyrion with ill intentions and said, Adam, don't listen to him. That little wild man is very dangerous. No one except Cersei can restrain his sword, he suddenly murmured and repeated, Cersei. Cersei. After his injury healed, it was easy for Jaime to fall into Cersei's vortex. Tyrion shrugged, ignoring his brother who was unable to get out for a while, and then looked at Sir Adam with a tense face. Marbrand, Jaime is just a brother with deep sisterly love. He smiled and said, you and Green are both leaders, you will definitely be able to talk to each other. Jaime's worries are unnecessary, no one understands Green better than me. Sir Adam stared at Tyrion for a while, and said coldly, Lannister, do I look like a fool? Tyrion's movements were exaggeratedly surprised. You actually saw that. His smile suddenly disappeared, and he said in a serious tone, Sir Adam, for the sake of life and death, I remind you that the Earl Crab you mentioned is the actual ruler of the Vale. Don't cause trouble for Lannister because you can't control your tongue. A pair of heterochromatic eyes stared at Sir Adam with a stiff face, and he said word by word, remember. After a pause, Adam Marbrand slowly nodded. Tyrion's face was full of smiles. Sir, according to my analysis, the little wolf should have led his troops to chase us the next morning after we escaped from Riverrun. The land under our feet is the little wolf's territory. We can't even find a small boat on the Red Fork River. Who can you think of who gave this order? The bounty offered by Green at least prevents all the people in the Riverlands from becoming the eyes of the little wolf. Well, I have to admit that his method is a bit rough. He scratched his hair and sighed. It's my fault for underestimating Robb Stark. Seeing Tyrion's face full of pain, Sir Adam hesitated and said, you have done a good job. No one expected so many accidents. After listening, Tyrion's face gradually climbed up with a smile. Adam, if we are lucky, we can still go smoothly tomorrow. The next day, Tyrion and others were not lucky. Near noon, with a thunderous sound of horse hooves, they were suddenly exposed to the side of the Northern Cavalry. 20 loyal Lannister red robes stopped and tried to stop them. The flag of the Ice Wolf fluttered, and hundreds of black and gray Northern cavalrymen, holding spears with cold light, rushed in like a gust of wind. The red robes faced the Northern cavalrymen who rushed towards them fearlessly, but they fell in a pool of blood one after another, and the battle ended almost instantly. Tyrion ran with his short legs, ran. He saw Sir Adam, who was carrying Jaime on his back, fell to the ground in front of him. Tyrion couldn't run anymore, and he was out of breath. He pulled out the short axe at his waist with difficulty, and his trembling hands tightly grasped the axe handle, thinking whether he died with honor. There was no trace of fear on the faces of the little squire and Podrick. He held the hilt of the sword with both hands and bravely blocked in front of Tyrion. Woo 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 woo, the Northern army horns sounded, and the galloping Northern cavalrymen slowly slowed down their horses. Jaime and Adam climbed up. Tyrion and Jaime looked at each other, and the four of them each held their weapons tightly. At this time, the low and long sound of the military horn came again, but it was from another direction. Tyrion immediately looked in the direction of the sound and saw the Marsh Marigold flag fluttering. He burst into tears. Chapter 299 The Art of War. As the neat sound of horse hooves sounded, rows of cavalrymen slowly appeared. They were dressed in uniform blue robes, and the silver plate armor on their bodies reflected dazzling light in the sun. In the middle were Tyrion and others, and the cavalrymen on both sides stopped their horses in tacit understanding. Under the Direwolf banner, they were dressed in chain mail, ringmail shirts and animal furs, and under the Swamp Marigold banner, they were dressed in uniform and neat blue robes and bright silver plate armor. They were both descendants of the ancestors, but it looked like a collision between barbarism and civilization. Green Crab glanced at the embarrassed Tyrion and Jaime, who were more than 100 yards apart. He looked across and his eyes fixed. He found a figure with a pointed crown under the largest flag. He rubbed his thumb against his index finger. After a moment, Green lightly kicked the horse's belly, and the horse under him walked forward, followed by Brienne holding the crab banner high. Ta-da-da! Green stared at Robb Stark, who also came with a standard bearer. No matter who is the real behind the scenes, the warlike Robb was indeed good at consuming the Lannister army. So, from his perspective, that person was a good guy. Close to each other, with Tyrion and others in between, Green and Robb almost simultaneously pulled the reins and stopped their horses. Sheathing his sword, Jaime sat down on the ground, as if he was basking in the sun in his own back garden. Tyrion, with his hatchet in hand, leaned on Jaime's shoulder, looking at Green and Robb with a smile. From the corner of Green's eye, he saw the Beggar brothers pretending to be cool at this time, the unshakable pride of the big family. Or was it the Westeros version of as long as you are not embarrassed, others will be embarrassed? It was really unbearable to watch. Green showed Robb a stiff friendly smile and waved. Are you Robb of the Stark family? When Green finished speaking, Robb frowned, and his standard-bearing officer said loudly, in front of you is the King of the North and the Trident, the king who swept across the West, King Robb of the Stark family, Green. Fortunately, King Green consulted Daenerys about the experience of titles before leaving the Vale, and he raised his hand to Brienne. Although Brienne's personality is dull, she will be full of courage when facing her duties. Moving her thick lips, Brienne raised her voice and said, the one in front of you is Earl of Crab Claw Peninsula, conqueror and ruler of the Vale, supreme commander of Crab Claw Peninsula archers and Vale cavalry, Green Crabble, Robb. After Brienne finished speaking, Green added, I'm a good friend of Jaime Lannister and Tyrion Lannister. Robb's eyes were cold. Green Crabble, you can't take a living Lannister away. Green spread his hands and replied calmly, there is such a possibility, but, if the war starts now, you may stay here forever. Robb Stark, Robb said coldly, including you. Yes, Green readily agreed with Robb's hypothesis. After a pause, he continued, as the ruler of a large land and the commander of the army, why would you push yourself into danger? Robb Stark, he looked at Robb's standard-bearer with pity, if you lose your life here, have you ever thought about the consequences? Or, don't you think about the vassal and warriors who follow your banner? Robb's eyes were full of bloodshot. He gritted his teeth and said, the Lannisters killed my wife and uncle. Blood debt can only be repaid with blood. No matter how clever your tongue is, it can't extinguish the fire of my hatred. Green glanced at the two Lannister brothers suspiciously, and asked Robb, are you sure they are the murderer? Robb first calmed down the surging anger in his heart, then said, I will give a fair trial. If they are not the murderer, I will ensure their safety. Green shook his head with a smile and said, Robb Stark, you don't have the power to judge Jaime and Tyrion. The only one who can judge them is King Joffrey Baratheon, who sits on the Iron Throne. You? Robb's face turned dark. Green's slender fingers tapped the ruby hilt of Lady Loneliness and said calmly, for the sake of Lord Ned, I can give you a chance to choose. Either fight, or, after a pause, he suddenly asked curiously, you are wearing that pointy thing on your head. Will Lord Ned need to swear allegiance to you when the time comes? The fire rose up. Robb didn't notice that Green used the pet name Ned when he called his father. He gritted his teeth and roared, Green Crab. Tyrion wanted to laugh, but he knew Stark's sword was still hanging over their heads, so he chose to look up to the sky silently, but Sir Jaime didn't care. With a face covered in dust, he smiled happily. Robb paused again, and when he looked at Green coldly, Sir Reynold behind him suddenly left the team and rode towards here. Seeing this, Monton kicked his horse and immediately rode towards where Green was. Sir Ronald's voice came first, King Robb, I have something important to report. Robb slowly withdrew his gaze from Green and turned his head to look. Ta-da-da, Sir Ronald arrived soon. He lowered his voice in Robb's ear and said, Your Majesty, the sentinels have detected that at least 2 cavalry groups are gathering here. The flags are swamp marigolds, the dust is flying, and there are thousands of people. They will arrive in half an hour at most. Robb frowned for a while, and he suddenly looked at Green and said coldly, Are you deliberately delaying time? His eyes were sharp. It seems that the Lannisters are not only your friends, they are also your bait. Green shrugged, with a regretful tone, It seems that you have seen through my wolf hunting plan. Robb snorted coldly. He looked at Jaime sitting on the ground, and said, Kingslayer, I hope you will have good luck next time. I will wait for you on the battlefield. Then, he glanced at Green coldly, turned his horse's head decisively, and rode away. After taking a bath and changing into clean clothes, Tyrion stared at the branch tied to the horse's tail in a daze. After a long while, he pointed at Green's masterpiece and said, In other words, you used this thing to scare away the little wolf. Green threw the wine bag to Tyrion and said, It's simple, but if you control the distance well, it can create a scene of a large number of cavalry riding horses. This is the art of war. Lord Green temporarily proclaimed himself as another war artist in Westeros. Tyrion laughed. The art of war of the Duke of Mace? I want to ask him for advice when I have time. After joking a few more times, Tyrion seemed to notice Bronn on the side. He pointed at Bronn's blue robe and said with an exaggerated expression, My captain of the guard, have you finally betrayed me? Bronn showed his signature obscene smile. "Master Tyrion, I will always be yours. As for this beautiful robe," he gracefully bowed to Green and continued, "seeing that my clothes are torn, they were given to me by the generous and kind Earl." Green smiled and stretched out 5 fingers to Tyrion. Tyrion uncorked the wineskin, took a sip of wine, and grinned. "A very fair price." When they were about to set off, Tyrion suddenly remembered Qyburn, who was left by them near the Inn of the Kneeling, and Bronn was soon given the task of bringing him back. Chapter 300 Tempting Reward. Nearing evening, Green and his party set up camp in an uninhabited village near the river road. In the only stone house, the clean Jaime Lannister lay with his eyes closed, looking like a haggard, delicate flower. Green looked at Jaime, who seemed to have fallen asleep, for a while, and then sat on the short wooden stake next to him. After a pause, he stretched out a finger and pressed on Jaime's wound. Jaime then cried out in pain. "Hiss! Damn little savage!" Green smiled and said, "When you pretend to sleep, you should pay attention to your breathing, seer." Jaime glanced at Green. He moved, sat on the bed, and leaned against the stone wall. His lips trembled, as if he had something to say. He held it in for a long time, but in the end he just sighed softly, looking at the spider web above in silence. Green took the initiative to speak. "Sir Jaime, did you gain anything from this trip to the Riverlands? How about it? Have you found your knight's heart again?" Chapter 168. After a moment of silence, Jaime suddenly said self-deprecatingly, "It's better to say it's a trip to the prison cell in Riverrun." Green raised his eyebrows slightly. "Are you pretending to sleep because you feel ashamed of this?" Jaime shook his head slightly. "I'm worried that I won't be able to help asking you." After saying that, he paused, looked at Green and said directly, "Do you know everything?" Seeing Green looking at him in confusion, Jaime opened his mouth and said, "About me and Cersei, you and Queen Cersei." Muttering, Green spread his hands and said, "I can only say, there are no secrets in the Red Castle, and I hope you are not asking about what I guessed." Jaime stared at Green for a while, and suddenly said, "How did you practice your sword and tongue together?" Without waiting for Green to react, he shook his head again. "Forget it, even if I have a clumsy tongue." Cersei. So, it was because Jaime learned about the things that Queen Mother Cersei had done to betray him that the usually high-spirited White Knight fell into some kind of self-doubt. Lord Green blinked, and Jaime's golden hair seemed to glow green. Blinked again. An illusion. "Lancel." After a pause, Jaime said again, "Cersei and Lancel, is this true?" Green asked doubtfully. What could she have with him?" Jaime was furious. "Little wild man, others may not know, but I know. I know you have a pair of eagle eyes." After a pause, he slowed down, his voice filled with annoyance. "Sorry, I am eager to verify. I know I shouldn't be like this, but, as long as I think of Cersei, I can't stay rational." Green reached out and patted Jaime's shoulder, saying, "Do you need me to help you find a good reason?" Jaime twisted his shoulder and shook off Green's palm, but it involved the wound on his arm and he hissed in pain. Green laughed happily. Jaime glanced at Green, who was gloating, and said unhappily, "Let me hear it." Green pinched his chin and said slowly, "At that time, I don't think anyone could have predicted that Tyrion would lead thousands of gold cloaks to severely damage Stannis' 100,000 troops, and no one could have predicted that the reinforcements of Lannister and Tyrell would appear outside King's Landing in time." His brown eyes looked at Jaime. "I think most people at that time thought they would die under Stannis' sword. The shadow of death looms over the Red Castle, so it would be normal if some crazy things happened." Green's good reason added a ray of light to Jaime's originally dim eyes. He murmured, "It's my fault. If I were with her, I shouldn't have left." Sooner or later Jaime will realize that Lord Green only slightly increased the difficulty of his trip to the Red Castle. A true knight is not afraid of tests. Cough. After a moment of silence, Green said have a good rest and was about to leave when Jaime suddenly said, "Lord Green, tell me the truth, have you ever been to Cersei's bed?" Green turned his head to look at Jaime who was staring at him, frowned, and said, "Sir, did you lose your knight's heart in the cell of Riverrun?" After that, he ignored Jaime and started walking. When he was about to reach the door, his footsteps paused. Green turned his head and looked at Jaime who was in a daze, and said, "The Light of the West, the Queen Regent, is charming and noble. Sir, you reminded me that I heard that someone wants to expel her from King's Landing. She must be helpless and pitiful now." The corners of his lips curved slightly. "Perhaps, this time I really have a chance to get a reward from Queen Mother Cersei personally. It's really exciting." After closing the door, Green could vaguely hear Jaime's roar. Damn. Duel, and other angry voices from behind. Ha, I can feel my brother's joy. Tyrion leaned against the tree outside the house, folded his arms, and tapped the ground with the tip of one foot. It must be said that his appearance hindered his handsome posture. Green walked over, and Tyrion asked with a smile, did it work, Green? Green shrugged, chuckled, and said, I hope it works. Well, your laughter makes me a little uneasy. Tyrion's tone was helpless. The two of them walked over and sat down by the campfire. Green picked up the wineskin and took a sip of wine, saying, Tyrion, let's go to Maidenpool first. Wait until Jaime recovers from his injury, then head south to King's Landing. Tyrion smiled obscenely. Maidenpool? Legend has it that this is the place where Florian, one of the legendary heroes handed down from the Age of Heroes, peeked at Jonqui and her sisters taking a bath. Good idea. Green tapped his chin lightly and said, it is rumored that the spring water in Maidenpool has magical healing powers. I don't know if it's true or not. We can just try it on Sir Jaime. Tyrion laughed in agreement at first, then his eyes moved slightly, and he said, Myes Mooten, the younger brother of the Earl of Maidenpool, was killed by Robert I in the Battle of the Bells. He has a hatred for the Baratheon Iron Throne. I heard that the Mooten family had long since defected to the Little Wolf. Will he welcome our visit? Green said in a flat tone. The former Earl of Maidenpool, William Mooten, has handed over the position of governor to my people, and Dick Crab will marry Earl William's heir. If all goes well, we can catch up with their wedding. After a pause, Tyrion looked at Green. Earl Mooten seems unexpectedly generous. Green smiled and replied, the reason why Earl William is generous is that Crab's army appeared at the door of his house. Tyrion understood at once, and he grinned. I suggest we speed up our pace. I like to attend other people's weddings, especially at night. His smile faded, and he said seriously, do you need me to remind you to bring more people with you to King's Landing? He grinned again. Let them protect me by the way. I guess. My gentle sister is sharpening her knife in Mead Tower every day, waiting to cut me into pieces of meat. After a pause, Green asked, I heard that Lord Tywin once intended to marry Queen Cersei to Reverin. It seems, this was your idea? Tyrion spread his hands and sighed helplessly. Reverin is a good place, but Sister Cersei always misunderstands the kindness of her obedient brother. I can imagine how angry Queen Cersei is with you. Green reached out and patted Tyrion, and comforted him sincerely. Sir Jaime will help you. Queen Cersei will at most lock you up in the dark cell for a few days. Don't worry, Tyrion said angrily. Green, I think you are gloating. We are as close as brothers. His eyes turned. Perhaps I can stay in Maidenpool for a while, and then go back after Cersei gets married. Green quickly punctured Tyrion's dream. Do you think Queen Cersei will cooperate obediently? Also, don't forget, you are the Chancellor of the Finance Council of the Privy Council, and Lord Tywin will never allow it. Tyrion scratched his hair and complained, I only know how to spend money, but I don't know how to make money. The old lion must have let me sit in that position because he couldn't find a copper star in the kingdom's treasury. He said weakly, I have to think of a good way to make Sister Cersei happy. It's too difficult. I don't know if she likes watching me dance. Green said in a disgusted tone, if you twist and turn in front of Queen Cersei, she will regard it as a provocation. At that time, even Jaime can't save you. I promise. Tyrion laughed, his short legs folded, and said, Green, everyone in the Seven Kingdoms knows that you are Cersei's favorite. I won't make it difficult for you. Please help me think of a good way. His expression became obscene. Everyone knows, you are the best at serving her. Ignoring Tyrion's joke, Green thought for a while and said, you rescued Jaime from Reverin, which can calm most of Queen Cersei's anger. After listening, Tyrion picked up the wineskin and took a big gulp of wine, wiped the corner of his mouth with the back of his hand, and said, Cersei's gratitude is short-lived. She is better at holding grudges. His eyes were complicated, especially mine. Green also took a sip of wine and said, it seems that we can only think of a solution through marriage. I think Queen Cersei would be willing to talk to you about this matter. Riverland, Highgarden. Tap tap. Margaery Tyrell's steps were much faster than usual, but she had a slender and charming waist, a slightly raised chin with beautiful curves, and a light figure. The servants in the corridor stood aside and bowed. Margaery's elk-like eyes gently swept over everyone who saluted her, with a gentle smile on her face. Standing in front of the door of the September, Margaery nodded gently, and the two waiters standing on the left and right of the door bent over and slowly opened the oak door. Entering the September, Margaery's beautiful eyes moved slightly, and she moved towards the direction of the statue of the Virgin Mary, where Lady Olenna stood quietly. Margaery gracefully lifted her skirt and called softly, "Grandma." With her back to her, Lady Olenna first nodded her eyes, then turned around and said, "Are you here to take me back, my Margaery?" Lady Olenna held her cane in one hand and staggered. Margaery hurried over to hold her arm. After getting closer, Margaery soon found the traces of tears in her grandmother's eyes, which made her heart lift. She was about to speak, but Lady Olenna stopped, slowly glanced at the statue of the seven gods, and said, "For an old woman like me, this is really not a good place." Grandma Margaery was helpless. Lady Olenna walked tremblingly with Margaery's support. She said, "The gods in heaven don't have time to deal with the nagging of an old woman on earth." She became more and more angry as she spoke. "If the gods were kind, they would not leave me two disabled grandchildren." Margaery hoped that her father, who had rushed to King's Landing, would appear here. Only the Duke of Metz could attract most of her grandmother's anger. Little Rose immediately stopped thinking. As a daughter, she shouldn't think like this. She felt guilty. Creaking, the closed door was opened again. Outside the sanctuary was a colorful rose garden. Lady Olenna and Margaery walked in the garden. The breeze blew, bringing bursts of flower fragrance and chirping birds. Lady Olenna was still furious, and she said angrily, "Margaery, I regret more and more why I didn't stop it. I should have refused sternly and let young Loras become Renly's squire. Renly, who loved to act, who only knew how to act, he deceived an old woman like me. Sooner or later, I will go to the Seven Hells to settle accounts with him." Today, Lady Olenna was much angrier, and Margaery was very worried. She had to betray her father. "Grandmother, although you were reluctant to let Loras leave Highgarden, there was nothing you could do." At that time, Father had already agreed to the invitation of Storm's End. Lady Olenna stopped and stared at her well-behaved and clever granddaughter motionlessly. She seemed to be recalling the past. After a while, she nodded and said, "Yes, I remember. It was my stupid son's decision." With a cold snort, she angrily said, "Stupid Borduke." After a few more curses, Lady Olenna finally calmed down. She said kindly, "Margaret, I'm tired. Let's find a place to sit for a while." "Yes, grandmother." Margaret smiled sweetly and prayed silently in her heart, "Gods, forgive me." They sat down in the pavilion in the garden. Lady Olenna took a sip of tea and motioned the maids around to stay away. Lady Olenna patted her granddaughter's smooth and delicate hand with her wrinkled hand, and said with relief, "Margaery, my Margaery, the future queen of the Seven Kingdoms, you are outstanding, unlike my stupid son who only blushes and puffs up his cheeks when he is anxious." Patting the back of Margaery's hand again, Lady Olenna leaned back in her chair and said, "Is there any specific news?" Margaery nodded slightly and said, "Yes, grandmother, we can now confirm that Edmure Tully and Jean Westerling both died of poisoning at the wedding banquet in Riverine, but they were poisoned by different poisons." Jean Westerling, the bride of the little wolf, mumbling for a while, Lady Olenna took a sip of tea, her eyes deep. "We can also confirm that there is another person hidden in the wedding in Riverine." Margaery flexed her fingers and said, "Grandmother, who could that person be?" Putting down the teacup, Lady Olenna stared at Margaery and said, "Let's stop here. Put away your useless curiosity and don't let anyone continue to investigate. This matter ends here." End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.